kind of thing. Yeah.
That wouldn't be legal.
Well, it's legal, but you have to have a lock on them here, but you don't have to have a lock on them in China. So they just sell them at the malls, basically. And they have guys like flashing them around. I'm like, if you flash that in my retinas,
That bag is
it's a
from
six
Is it the
watt
pictures?
laser.
I've been carrying that around.
Yeah, it
And
hurts
you
on
see
your
the
hand.
community
Shining
builder
on
thing.
your
It's
hand.
Okay.
your little award for
It'll pop
legally.
lasers. And by
Okay.
That was from the November.
I know.
Yeah, all this time.
like if you like,
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
And you
Thought
got
I'd better bring it.
I said, treat it like a gun.
Yes.
Point it in
Yes.
anything you wouldn't.
Just
want.
move
There's
it.
no blind.
Wow.
There is no clock.
He's been into lasers
Right.
for years and he's wanted
So it really is like,
Oh, there we are.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started with the March 10th council work session. And if you don't know it already, there's 3 items on the agenda. And the first one is we're going to discuss among ourselves, the council, our upcoming goal setting process. It's slated for 30 minutes. It's a very structured conversation. Maybe we'll be able to finish that a little bit sooner. Follow that, we'll have a discussion about the interlocal agreement that the city of Issaquah is working on in conjunction with the Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District. And following that will be our discussion about Klahanie. We expect the third part, Klahanie, to be the most elastic part of the schedule. Hence, we want to have the most of time available without pressure to get to our other items. So thank you for attending. Council, you ready to get started? So, Mary Lou and Nina are about to go through their first council goal setting process. And over the last few months, Deputy President Goodman and I have been taking a close look at the process. And tonight, we're going to introduce what we're going to do for the next 60 days and answer any questions that you may have. And just as a matter of introduction, again, I know Josh and Tola and Eileen and Stacy are very familiar with this. For Nina and Mary Jo's purpose, really the goal setting, the purpose of this annual goal setting session is for the council to set a strategic direction and priorities for the city in the coming years. During this process, the council, that's us, of course, the mayor's office and the city staff partner to discuss strategic needs of the city and identify programs and projects that will guide the city toward achieving its ultimate vision. So just a real basis, it's just a review, I know that, but just to get our heads in this. We do this every year, and we haven't given it any thought for almost a year. Now, there's a couple things we're going to be talking about that might sound a little bit different, and here are the highlights. One of the things we're going to do is really work to identify goals and discuss goals that are based upon what we're calling the existing city visioning documents. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. In the short time that I've been on the council, there's been conversations, about the duration of our goals and objectives. And one of the things that we're really going to encourage this year that we think much bigger and strategically, and that 1 year, maybe it's a 2 year, 3, 5, or longer type goal. We really think that for the best interests of the city, that we as a council, to be most effective, should be working to identify and should be able to propose and discuss goals that go beyond just 1 year to define and implement. We're going to strongly encourage collaboration among council members. We know that we collaborate in the past, we got together on what we call the retreat, and we would collaborate and maybe collapse 1 or 2. There's almost that's inevitably what happens. And we're actually going to encourage that collaboration to happen before, or actually perhaps during the formation of your council goals. Just as an example, Stacy and I have been talking. We've had the opportunity because we formed this, but to maybe collaborate on something related to transportation. And the idea is that if you were to work together with some of your peers, and that when we get to the point of actually reviewing them and voting on them, they'll be that much better vetted, and hopefully something that the rest of the council is really interested in. And then finally, a little bit different, we're going to separate the process a little bit. The actual review, where we go over all of the goals that have been proposed and the staff's response, we're going to do that in one meeting, and then later on, we're going to get together and actually go through the selection process. So let's take a look at the calendar really quick. Today is the kickoff. And then 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to have our quarterly committee of the whole, and that's where we're going to get a staff update. That's not unlike what we've done during the first part of the retreat in years past. So for example, a current year financial update, an update on the current council goals and their status. We're planning on getting a presentation of the SWOT analysis completed by the Economic Vitality Commission, a presentation to us. And that'll be another opportunity for us also, because we're together discussing it, perhaps to identify opportunities for collaboration among one or two or three council members on a goal that appears to be of mutual interest. So we're going to get that update at the COW in 2 weeks. Then a month from today, our submittals are due. Then the traditional 3 weeks for the staff to prepare their responses. They'll be due on May 2nd. Then 2 weeks from tonight, at the work session from tonight, we're actually going to do. I'm sorry, Stacey. Sorry. 2 months from tonight at the work session we're going to actually go over them. We're going to at least discuss them. Each council member or groups are going to actually kind of present their goals. It's not, the intent isn't to do the full vetting like we have traditionally done in the retreat, but it's to do our initial presentation. So that's on a Tuesday night. And then 5 days later on Saturday the 17th, we'll be gathering off site to complete the process and ultimately select our goals for the year. So that's the schedule, and we'll I'll show it again at the end. A word about these visioning documents. The city is best served when the chosen goals are aligned with existing priorities, goals, and vision for the city. This assures that each goal is grounded in a basis already determined to be of significant importance to the city. The following documents all contain city goals and objectives. Newly proposed goals should include one or more references back to one of these documents, just as an agenda bill includes references to the comprehensive plan. Council members, we may all have to refamiliarize ourselves with these documents in order to complete this part of our goal submission. Next we're going to kind of go over the form. It hasn't changed much, but it's going to be an opportunity to show what we mean by the references to the guiding documents. And so real quick, I'm going to toggle over. It doesn't look, the only thing I want to bring your attention to is we're going to have this area of the categories in there. Not a big deal. One of the reasons this isn't finalized, we'll finalize and get this out to you. We really want to settle on the categories, but it's just another way of kind of checking in if I'm doing something on mobility, if I'm doing something on financial sustainability, just to categorize it, a very simple piece. But another piece, Stacey has been doing quite a bit of research on different cities and how they've done their goal setting as well, and we've come upon something that we think is a slight change to what we've done in the past, and it's this area called why the goal. Why this goal? Stacey, you want to comment on that?
Sure. Well, as Paul mentioned, I have done quite a bit of research on how other cities conduct their goal setting, and I've come upon something that time and time again I found it similar cities do things similar ways, and one way they do things is they have a why this goal, or they might call it something else, but it's basically the why, and it usually talks about where we are now at this time in the city and what we have going on and what we have coming up in the future, and it provides a little bit of a backdrop for the reason about why the goal here, why the goal is being proposed. And the reason for that is because goal setting should be sort of strategic planning, and so if you're able to put the why this goal, then it gives everybody an opportunity to see maybe why this is important to have at this time. So that's kind of why you have the why the goal.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
On the categories, could we include an other? I did notice, for instance, environmental sustainability initiatives. I mean,
yeah,
theoretically it could be under open space, but.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. And that's one of the reasons it's not finalized, that we haven't really vetted that. And it was, when I wrote down open space, I was thinking that, but we should make that more clear. Any other questions about that part? Okay, the next part in this example is to do with the references to the guiding documents. And I just wanted to show you what that looks like. So like the agenda bills have entries where there notes their consistency with the comprehensive plan. We're doing the same kind of thing. And a comprehensive plan is a collection of objectives and priority, or policies, excuse me. So I just pulled one example. It's straight out of an existing agenda bill, 6759, which we approved a week ago tonight. It had to do with the allocation of our portion of the Arch Housing Trust Fund. And so there's a direct reference in there. And so that's what that would look like. Now, you may have multiple, like many times our agenda bills do. The next document on here is the Economic Vitality Task Force Strategic Plan from 2006. Now, interesting thing about that document, it was accepted by the council. It was never formally adopted, but as we reviewed that, it is striking how many of the priority actions our city has already achieved. And so whether we know it or not, there is a basis of consideration. There was a lot of good work in there. And if you come up with a goal and can find a basis for it in that document, the idea is to highlight it here. And then the last one is the City Issaquah Vision Statement from 1990. That was the last time when Rowan Hines was mayor that the city went through a very exhaustive exercise and identified, our current motto of a special place where people care. There's a vision statement, and there are items in there called guiding principal goals. This is only like a 3-page document, and the idea, if again we have a proposing a goal that aligns with something that has already kind of been determined as expressing the priorities and goals of the city and being able to reference it here. Again, the idea is that we would then be coming forth with goal proposals that are really well aligned with these guiding documents that we have. Now, it's possible you may have multiple references. Maybe you want to propose something and you can't find a single reference. And I don't want to dissuade that. That might be a suggestion that we have a gap somewhere. And I think we all should be open to that. But indeed, if you refamiliarize yourselves with the documents, you might find that that is very helpful. Now, the last part, yes, Josh?
One other question. If it's possible to have some of these documents emailed to all of us so that we don't have to hunt them down.
I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Absolutely. We're going to make it drop dead easy.
When I type 1990 vision statement Issaquah into Google, I get iCare.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah, we're going to get to that. We're going to put it all together in one place where everybody can get to that.
Thank you.
Now, the other item that's on here is called action items. And again, I'm going to ask Stacy to say a few things about that. But rather than just looking at this form up here, we have actually an example in the presentation. Stacy?
Sure. Again, this came out of the research I did with other cities, and it was very typical for cities to not only have a goal, but then to have the action items or the action steps that needed to be taken to actually achieve that goal. And they're always called action items or action steps or implementation steps or something. And they're called that because those are actually the specific steps that need to be taken to achieve the goal, and they're very specific, not that slide yet. I mean, not the next one yet, just leave it.
Tell me when.
I will.
Okay.
And they're very specific because it needs to be clear to everyone just how the goal would be achieved. And as I was working through this, I actually kind of worked through some myself and found out that it really was a valuable process to try to identify those steps, because it tells you a number of things when you're working through those steps or trying to work through naming those steps. It tells you whether the goal is actually achievable, and it tells you whether the goal is clear and also whether it's measurable. That so said, it can also be a very challenging exercise because there's no real magic process. What we've tended to do in the past is come up with these brilliant goals. And that's meant to be a joke. And then we would tend to leave it to the administration or the staff to figure out how we're going to achieve those goals. And I myself have had meetings with staff, maybe after a goal has been adopted by the council, and the conversation is about, well, how do you envision we're going to get there? Well, I didn't really know. And I found that to be very informative as I'm working through these now, and now I know why, because it's difficult to figure out how you're going to achieve achieve a goal, but yet we are wanting staff to achieve those goals. But like I said, there's no real magic process for figuring out how you're going to get there. So let's go ahead and show the,
Okay, so this is
the first.
you can maybe guess at, gee, how would you actually achieve this? And this is an example that's pulled out of the City of Burlingame, California's document, and it did include a number of action items.
So the, if I can recall Burlingame, it might be that their strategy might, I'm not sure exactly, every city does a little bit differently. They have their visions and they have their goals, and they have their strategies, so they might call it a strategy and a goal. The words don't really matter. They had identified the need to maintain and enhance Burlingame's high-quality services that meet the needs of the community. Okay, so if you just look at that by yourself, well, how are you going to do that? Well, I know one year the council decided it was really important to explore technology to enhance efficiency and communications. Okay, well, if you just look at that by itself, how, you can see how you need to sit around and figure out how you were going to do that. But if you take it one step further and you identify how you're going to get there, you can see the action items there, and all of them are action items. They say exactly what they're going to do. They're going to tape and stream online more public meetings, install and implement agenda management software, and on and on and on. And each one of those is very specific, and each one of those is measurable. And you can call it the to-do list of the goal. There could be a little box in front of each one of those numbers, and as it's achieved, it's checked off. And it just makes it clear to everyone, the council, the staff, and the public, how the city is going to achieve the goals. And so that's the point of the action items. And as we work through, if you have a goal and you're trying to identify what the action items might be, and you can't find one, it might be that you've identified a project and not a goal. Or if you come up with tons of steps and you look at that again, you might have maybe bitten off a goal that needs to be pared down a little bit or broken down into different goals. So it's a very instructive exercise.
And my sense, too, is this is where collaboration, especially if you discover that 2 or more of you, up to 3 of you, do share an interest in a particular topic, where this could be very helpful. And I don't know at this point, because we were limited to work with one other person, we did a little trial run with this with Mary Lou. Mary Lou, do you have any comment? I know I didn't prepare you ahead of time, but.
It's on.
Yeah, don't touch it.
Yeah, I like the exercise quite a bit, and actually I had the opportunity last year to sit and watch the council retreat and see how the goal process worked. And it was very interesting to start my own exercise and come up with a trial goal, and then sit down and follow these steps, because I think I told you both, the first one I picked, I actually blew up within a few minutes and realized that what I'd picked was it wasn't necessarily a concrete goal, it was more of a good idea, and then I couldn't flesh it out after. So I did move into another one looking at affordable housing, and once I was on the right track of starting with the big goal and coming down through the why and the references to our other documents and all the rest, it was quite easy actually to get to the bottom of something with something very concrete. So I thought it was a great exercise, it was a good test run, and this is a great approach.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? We're just about to wrap up. Okay, so what's still to come? So the form that I showed you is incomplete. I knew the categories is some vetting. I'm going to give it, we'll finalize that very soon. And we've asked the administration actually to create a special page on the website for this. So much of the material that we have here, but also to explain the purpose for their goals, the update information that we're going to get in 2 weeks could be there. And so, Josh, this will be the location. Well, the comp plan is there, but the Economic Vitality Task Force from 2006 and the City Vision from 1990. We'll make sure they're all accessible there. And another thing that in her studies that Stacy found that I thought was really compelling as well is that this is really a good opportunity, and with modern social media and our website, we've asked the staff to put together a web page where we actually can solicit and receive input from the community through the process. So we have some formation ideas about this, for example, what might you think, what's the priority items in your mind? And Stacy, what would be the other one off the top of your head, do you remember?
what highest priorities the council should be working on, the city should be working on, and maybe what do you think the most important thing is the city should be working on?
So the idea
Questions like that.
of continuing in this theme that we've had, we started within the last year, really reaching out and connecting, with, residents of Issaquah and our guests, that to extend that and to help them, contribute their voice to this very critical information process that we're going through. So last slide, just a reminder. In 2 weeks with the cow, we'll get the update. March 11th, which is a Friday, our submittals will be due. 3 weeks later, the staff responses will be due. And then 2 months from tonight, we'll be going over every one of these submittals. And again, the offsite, the details, we have the date. I think we did a save the date already, so we know everybody's available on the 17th. Any other questions? We good? All right. Thank you for that. Now, so that concludes our first agenda item for tonight. Now we're going to move on to a discussion. We have a couple guests tonight with us about our interlocal agreement with the Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District. And do we want Dan and Jeff to join us at the table? We have one available chair.
I did. I forwarded it today. So Jeff and Dan, Jeff is our special counsel, Dan, our city engineer, will go through the ILA. This is not real new in terms of the points that are in there because you approved the memorandum of agreement a couple of months ago, and this provided the skeleton and the framework for the ILA, which is actually pretty similar. I think there's a few issues that we're still kind of working through, but relatively minor, we believe. The one new thing that you hadn't seen yet was a decommissioning plan, which Dan Irvin put together, and he can talk about what that means for the LRIG. And then they're both available to answer questions. And Jeff and Dan, I don't know if you have a little presentation or you want to go through it, how you want to handle it. But turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good to see everybody. Have you had an opportunity to take a look at the draft?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'll do a high-level summary of what the purpose of it is and what it does. I'll walk through some of the key points, and I'll turn it over to Dan to talk about the decommissioning element of it, the science side. I'll talk about the legal.
You need to talk into the microphone.
Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. So the interlocal agreement is the next step from the memorandum of agreement, and it provides greater detail to what the proposed settlement that the parties reached under the memorandum that was then documented in the memorandum of agreement. And the process is really to take the dispute over how the Lower Reed Infiltration Gallery was going to operate and resolve it in a way that allows the city to continue managing its stormwater and not discharge it underground in the way that the Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District found challenging to it. And so the future discharges will be to surface, not to underground injection, and that's a primary point of the agreement. And that involves decommissioning the LRIG from its injection approach, the way it's currently set up, to a surface flow approach. In exchange for that, the district is going to provide funding to help us make that transition, to help the city make that transition. They'll provide $1 million in funding. And so that's what this agreement memorializes. There is a process for decommissioning. Dan has prepared a plan, but the parties have not yet agreed on that plan. We had hoped to have that decommissioning part of this document, but given the time frames that are set forth, what we're going to do is just say that we're going to get it agreed upon by December 31st, 2014. I think we're actually well along on that process. I got some initial feedback from the district's attorney today that it looks
like they are going to be fine with that proposal. They did ask for some new language to be put in here that allows them a right of entry onto the city's property to confirm that it is in fact decommissioned. And the reason for that, and Dan will talk about this in more detail, is the way that we're decommissioning it would potentially allow you to recommission it down the road as opposed to taking it all out. But it'd be much more expensive to remove it, and this is a preferable alternative from our perspective. We're also supposed to provide the district with a list of the projects on which we would be spending the money. Each of these deadlines is December 31st, 2014. So there will be more work to do on moving forward with this set of issues. That list doesn't mean that it's going to be the final, but it is itemizing. These are the things that we think we would use the money for. The stormwater management would then, rather than be under a special permit as the injection approach would be, will go back to under Western Washington's general permit, which is the Phase 2 municipal permit. And so all of your stormwater discharges through this system would be governed the same way that your other discharges are throughout the city. There wouldn't be anything special about this particular portion of the system. I think those are the highlights. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that needs special attention. Bob, is there anything else you wanted me to call out to this group?
Nope.
Okay.
Those are the
Dan?
highlights.
I think you can talk about that, but speak beforehand, see if there are other questions. Paul?
Yeah, since you spoke specifically to the documentation, I think on the date in 2.10, did you mean January 13th, 2014?
Yes. Sorry about that. Let me go back to the draft.
Because that's the date of the MOA we did.
No, what I meant is December 31st. That's the end of this year. We're supposed to provide the list of projects on which we would spend the money. It's in paragraph 2.04 on page 2.
Yeah, and I'm talking about 2.10, which you didn't address.
Okay. In 2.10, yes, that is a typo. It should, instead of June 13th, it should be January 13th, which is the date of the MOA.
Okay. And then I noticed that this, if you do a keyword search on the word assumption, it doesn't show up anywhere. And is it by reference to the MOA in this paragraph that we're handling the question of assumption?
Assumption has been addressed in a separate document. Is there a paragraph in here where it says assumption?
Keyword search didn't show assumption at all. So,
Yeah.
but this is the reference to the MOA. So,
Correct. The MOA talks about assumption, and then there is a separate document that the city's council, Wayne Tanaka, was involved in drafting that addresses that piece of the agreement.
okay. Have I seen that? Am I just forgetting?
Yeah, the council actually adopted
Okay.
that.
The one about assumption already? So it's not just in the MOA?
It's in the MOA, and then it's in, you did a separate contractual agreement that dealt with a couple specific points that was
Okay.
already
All
approved
right.
by the council.
Thanks.
Right. This particular document is specific to the LRIG.
Right. Right. That's all I had. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
There's another question. Mary Lou?
So there was, on one of the copies that we saw today, there was also a strikeout about filing fees and searches. Is that because that's also was under the memorandum of agreement? Doesn't need to be in there because it's not an LRIG issue?
Strikeout with regard to.
It was the last thing sent out today, Bob. I can't remember.
I didn't hear the first part of your sentence.
Filing fees.
Oh, sorry. There was a part on one of the documents we received today where there was a cross-out of everything that had to do with file searches. And is that
Public Records Act? Is that
Yeah.
the-
Is
yes.
that because it doesn't have anything to do with the LRIG and it was covered under the memorandum of agreement?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that would have been former paragraph 2.11 that the district has asked to be deleted. The city has not responded to that. We're still exchanging some final drafts on that.
Another question, Stacy?
Thanks. Jeff, in, where is it? Sorry. The reference to, oh, here it is. In 2.02, you talked about the decommissioning and the date being December 31, 2014. So I think what I wanted to know is the intent to decommission by December 31 this year, or is it to have an acceptable plan? Because what you said is not what this says, and so I just wanted to make sure we have the accurate language in here.
Yes. So the intent is to have the decommissioning completed by that date, not merely a plan for the decommissioning.
Is that feasible? Okay. And the parties are Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District and the city, but down in 1.02 there's a reference of City of Sammamish representatives, but then there's also a specific reference toward the end of the document about express that there are no third-party beneficiaries.
Correct.
And so I'm wondering why we have City of Sammamish in here if we don't want any arguments later about somebody else having some kind of standing to enforce this.
I think it would be fine to take out the reference to City of Sammamish in 1.02, and we can propose that to the district. It's there more for factual background that they were at the table during
Sure.
negotiations, but your point is well taken, and we can ask them to take that out.
Okay. Then on 2.04, on page 3, fourth sentence down, fourth line, but the sentence says the district funding for the project shall be paid by the district to the city to reimburse the city for its costs incurred for the projects once the projects have been completed by the city. I wonder if we need some kind of a definition of completed in here?
The next version of the city's version will have that word will be changed to performed, is our proposal, and that's something that we haven't addressed with the district yet. And the reason for that is to allow some more flexibility on the process because completion has a finite element to it that we think is too difficult to meet
Okay.
here. So that's a proposal, but if there are is other language that we think would be better there, we're open to that.
Well, I was just going to suggest that we look at those words and provide definitions if we need to so that we don't have to argue about it later.
Understood.
And then in 2.08, we talk about the joint releases. Neither party will issue a press release or communicate with news services regarding the issues addressed in this agreement. So I see it says specifically news services, and I know we were, the releases related to the MOU were not specifically related to news services, and so I'm wondering if it's something we need to talk about. Not hugely important, but I think everybody kind of wanted to be on the same page for releases, and I don't know that we want to restrict it to news services, but that's just a comment for the administration to consider.
So Stacy, can I ask you to clarify that there was a release relative to the MOU?
I thought there was a release to customers. That was not a joint release. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's what my comment's about. If the administration thinks, I think the idea is to work together and be on the same page, and if that's what we want, then that should be clarified.
I do recall when that came up, and we wondered aloud if that constituted a release per the terms of the MOU, and was that within the spirit of the MOU or not? And
Right.
that's your question?
Yes.
Do you have a suggestion?
My suggestion is just, I'm not sure what the intent is, and so if it is that we work together on all releases, then we should have it say that, regardless of who the recipient is. And it shouldn't be just specific to news services.
So one option would be to take the phrase "with news services" out of the agreement, which
Yep.
would have the effect of broadening the
Sure.
communication.
Yes. And I didn't know how the negotiations have been, so I didn't know what you all kind of wanted in there.
We'll discuss that with the
Okay.
district.
And I think that's it.
Josh?
So I had two items. One was piggybacking on a comment Stacy made, and I just lost the section here. It had to do with the 5 years to complete versus when the payments are made. And I guess I was just having a hard time reconciling the language, and I think it's section 204. If we're proposing perform and accepted, I couldn't really reconcile that with the idea that there's no obligation to pay for and reimburse any projects not completed within 5 years. And maybe it's because I don't know what that list is, and so it's hard to know what are these projects and when will they actually be completed. I mean, if they're all going to be completed in 2 years, then it's a non-issue. If there's some that may cross into that 4 to 5 year window, then I see the potential for conflict, which is the district saying we have no obligation to reimburse if you go over the 5 years, but at the same time, we're suggesting that the payments are made upon acceptance and the beginning of performance. So if we already have the money, are we supposed to then give it back if it goes over 5 years? It creates a conflict point for any projects that may fall within that window. And again, not seeing the project list, I don't know if there's that risk, but from a technical wording standpoint, I can foresee a potential conflict there. So that was one issue. The other issue was on the Public Records Act request 2.11. There's a deletion proposed for 211, and I went back and looked at the MOU, or MOA, the memorandum, and paragraph 11 of that document does contain language saying the parties agree to resolve all outstanding claims regarding Public Records Act disputes. So if we've got some things dealing with assumption that are in the memorandum but not in the ILA, is this also supposed to be one of those types of items where it's covered under the MOU, so therefore we don't need to put it in the ILA? Is that the basis for the deletion?
That's in a separate contract, yes, as I recall.
So is 211 even in the latest update? I thought I heard you say earlier
No,
you took
it
that
would
out.
be out. That's
Right.
the district would like to
Right.
take it out. We haven't responded to that.
So that would be similar to the assumption question that Paul just asked about. It's going to be separated out, put into a different document, not part of this ILA. Is that
It's already in the other document, if I remember correctly.
in the MOU?
It's
in
in
the
the
MOU.
MOA,
The MOA.
MOA, and then
You-
there is the other contract. And Bob, do you remember if
The
it's in
one
there?
we can't remember.
I think I'd have to look
Yeah.
to make sure, but I think actually most of those issues have already been resolved as a result of this, if I recall. So we didn't have any outstanding requests. The district did have some, and I could see if I can pull that document up. But I think it got dealt with. Otherwise, we'll make sure it gets dealt with. We don't want to leave any hanging requests out there.
Because I think, like Paul, I remember the MOA. I don't know if I remember those terms being in a separate document, at least not one that's come before the council in the last month or two. But maybe I'm forgetful on that point as well.
Well, we'll certainly follow up on that.
So those are the two issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for Jeff?
I will stick around so that if
Please
there are
do.
questions that arise out of Dan's discussion of the decommissioning, we can address those as well.
Decommissioning is really very simple. The El-Rig facility was built with the capability to bypass so that the facility could be maintained. So really all we need to do is just go into bypass mode rather than the infiltration mode. District wants surety that there wouldn't be accidental or even intentional infiltration as a result of that. So basically the decommissioning plan includes filling the infiltration pipes with concrete. So there's a little more to it than that. We need to put in a plug so the concrete doesn't break and ravel, et cetera. But basically we're going to fill the 2 manholes that exist on each end of the bioswales that allow the water from the bioswales to enter into the infiltration pipe. We'll just fill the bottom of those manholes with concrete. That'll block off the bottom of the pipes and make them inoperable. There is some capability in the future to jackhammer that concrete out and return it to service, and that's why the district has asked for access to the site to make sure that the concrete remains intact and isn't removed. But the decommissioning process is very simple and relatively inexpensive.
So that was one of my questions about the access. Was it meant to be in perpetuity, or was it just access to make sure that we had decommissioned like we said we were going to?
I actually don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I'm not sure we know. We haven't had, this is a new issue that arose today from comments on the decommissioning plan. I'm not sure the extent to which the district thinks they need to ensure that that remains occluded for all time, or whether that's through the current administration. I think the next couple of days we'll sort
Okay.
that out.
Dan, did you have any other comments?
No.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Dan? I do have one then. Could you comment about the quality of the water being discharged to surface? I assume we're in the, if it were to flow to surface, it would eventually flow into the North Fork?
It'll discharge into the North Fork Issaquah Creek, and it'll leave the El Rig facility and follow a pipe onto a bird cage by First Avenue. Bird cage is a manhole. It bubbles out of a manhole by First Avenue near the driveway to Lakeside, and then flows through a bioswale and existing ditching from there into the North Fork. And we've been monitoring water quality out of that facility for the last 3 years, and in most cases that water meets drinking water standards. So the only violations of that we had are for bacterial contamination, which is present in all stormwater and present in the receiving water body at equal or greater concentrations. So we have every expectation that we're delivering water to North Fork Issaquah Creek that's cleaner than the water that's there currently.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Dan? Yes,
Can
Nina.
I ask a follow-up?
Please
Because
do.
I live in Issaquah Highlands, and I was glad for your question, and it might, people might be incredulous, how could it be so clean? But isn't this a category of stormwater that has been managed upstream by the kind of development that Issaquah Highlands has and some preventive measures?
Yes,
That
and-
just a couple more details might make that believable.
And I would say managed to an unprecedented level. So stormwater quality was one of the key negotiating factors in the development agreement, and one of the cornerstones of the development being innovative and forward-thinking, and that there were going to be new standards applied and new technologies applied to clean the stormwater. And probably one of the most effective features of that was actually source controls, and that's starting with water that's clean to begin with. So, for example, copper and galvanized materials are prohibited in the project because those can leach and lead to lead and other heavy metals that are present in the stormwater. The theory being that it was much easier to prevent them from getting into the stormwater than from taking them out after they were already there. And our experience has been that that's been very effective, and this stormwater is cleaner than most stormwater in other municipalities and from other urban areas.
Well, if there are no other questions, then thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Dan. And we will. And I am remiss. We have the latitude at our committee meetings on a per-topic basis to accept comments from the general public. So I'm going to actually open it up at this time, and I would ask that if you would just stand and identify yourself, keep your up to 3 minutes. I'm going to time, and thank you. So I see one person and another. So Connie, go ahead, please. Actually, why don't you use the microphone, because then our guests at home can hear you. No,
We are live now,
that's
though.
the eject
Yay.
button. Oh, okay.
Aren't you funny? So, because I didn't get to comment on the prior topic, I'm going to say I would like to know when the website's going to be up for the goal setting session. for the public access. And
I don't think we have a commitment date, but we're committed to do it as soon as possible.
okay. So the output of the stormwater from Issaquah Highlands, from my perspective, never went through the EIS. It was never said in the EIS that they were going to ever output into the North Fork. This has been a long topic of conversation. So it's not so much water quality, though that is always of a concern. It's the water quantity and the pre-existing condition as compared to what will be being put in there post. Now, remember, they've been putting water in the North Fork for quite some time now. And so your baseline would have to be, I guess, before Issaquah Highlands in order to create that. So environmental review needs to be done in order to be able to actually legally or through SEPA output into the North Fork. So I want to know when and if that's going to happen. You don't have to tell me now.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Yes, my name is Tom Harmon. I live at 4369 243rd Avenue Southeast in Klahanie, Issaquah, and I'm speaking as a commissioner of the Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District. And it's been a lot of hard work. I want to thank the city for all of its hard work, and we spent a lot of time trying to solve a problem that we both have, and I think it started out in good relationship and collaboration between the city of Issaquah and the district. And again, I just wanted to thank you. I think we overcame some very big problems and differences. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to comment? Anybody else wishing to comment on this topic before we wrap up with any final council comments or questions? Okay, so audience comments are closed. Did you have something?
Just a
Mary
follow-up
Lou?
question. We're
Sure.
hearing about a list of projects. Is the EIS one of the projects on the list?
Is-
Or SEPA, sorry. Is the SEPA one of the projects on the list?
I don't think so. I don't think so. The list of projects that are referenced in the ILA are actually the improvements necessary to mitigate the flood-related
Time's up.
impacts of the discharge. To the extent that SEPA is required for that, it would be a component of one of those actions, but I don't think it stands alone
On
as
its
a
own.
separate
Okay.
project on the list.
Thanks, Dan.
Since SEPA needs a nexus with a project, it would be normal for that to be a component of an action, not the action itself.
Okay.
So as a follow-up to that, if I may ask, and I'm glad that I had intended to ask about this as well, because we talked about it previously. Just a professional opinion. Do you expect that SEPA will be part of any of these projects?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then that's the process through which, we have the built-in checks and control to make sure that whatever impacts and proper mitigations are handled. So,
Yes.
okay. All right. Thank you, Dan. Any other questions from the council? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next, we're on to the third agenda item for tonight, and you will allow me. Okay, so this is where, I don't remember the agenda, Bill, but there's been a couple events recently, obviously with the completion of the certification of the Klahanie annexation vote. Those results have been certified, and at the same time, our city has initiated its comprehensive update process, and there's an agenda bill on the docket for tomorrow at Land and Shore, where they're considering the docket of potential amendments to our comprehensive plan. So this is a very good time and good opportunity for us on the council to review the subject and consider the options in front of us. And the primary objective of this conversation is for the entire council and to give a sense of, through our own comments, direction to the committee that is going to be doing the formal action, and Councilmember Martz is well aware of that process. So the agenda for this part of the meeting is we're going to take a quick look at the annexation vote results. We're going to take a look at the city's current comprehensive plan, our plans for making amendments to our comprehensive plan. Then as a council, we'll discuss what the options on Klahanie are for us. Then and this time I put it in the agenda, a reminder to accept audience comments after that part of it, and then as a council, like we just did, we'll have an opportunity for any kind of final comments. So, I think hopefully that's very visible. So this is the annexation results by precinct, and the green is an indication where a precinct voted in favor of annexation by, and I think it was at least 50% of the voters were in favor of the measure to annex into Issaquah. And the reddish pinkish color represents those precincts that were less than 50%. And if you can see the table at the bottom, they actually have the percentages broken down by the percent for and percent against. So there was quite a range from percent for down at Brookshire, which is the bottom kind of southern triangle, along with Ranch and Klahanie precincts. Now these precincts don't necessarily align, and they do not align with established kind of neighborhoods or necessarily with homeowner association boundaries either. These are voter precincts. So just so you could see that, I didn't really have more to say. This is just factual data from the vote. Anybody have any comments or insights before we proceed? Okay, so a comment about the relationship of the PAA, the Preferred Annexation Area, and the PAA and its relationship to the city's comprehensive plan. So I think it's we've talked about this before, we've heard it before, so a lot of this should be reviewed. Only one city can have any portion of a PAA in its comp plan at a time. And so currently what's known as the Klahanie PAA is within the city, our comprehensive plan. Now now we must release, and that's by changing our comprehensive plan, all or a portion of the Klahanie PAA before Sammamish could add it to their comp plan. So there's a very definite and well understood and defined step that we must change our comp plan and for it to be available for Sammamish to add any portion or what becomes available to their comp plan. Further, the county has to reflect those same changes in there. There's a process that goes through the Growth Management Planning Council and eventually to the county council themselves to accept the policy and to amend the county's comprehensive plan to reflect the PAA. At the GMPC 2 weeks ago, Executive Council was very clear that their job really is to kind of paint the map, draw the map of what is represented in the various cities' comprehensive plans. And so I would hope that that follow-on process by the county would just be adhering to those actions of us and perhaps Sammamish. Another very important point is that, and this is an important factor that everybody needs to be aware of, that by state law, any city may amend its comp plan only once a year. So that is the formal action by a council to pass changes and adopt changes, an update to their comprehensive plan. Now, there are exceptions to that if there's a sub-area, and I think the CIP was an example of that, the Central Issaquah Plan. But but in general, changes to the comp plan can be accomplished by a city once a year. Now, and I have this in quote, and maybe one of my colleagues on the council knows the more appropriate name. I have it 2014 is a major amendment year. What's it formally known as? Does anybody know? Okay, so let's just say that the breadth of the update, the comprehensive-ness of the update is quite large. And I think we currently have a list of 18, and it may be growing, potential amendments to our comprehensive plan that we're considering. And because of the scope of this, and I believe this type of update comes along every 7 years, is it? And that the state law actually allows an additional 6 months to complete that amendment with this major amendment year. So as of the moment, unless we were to change something, our city's plan is to complete our 2014 comp plan amendments by June of 2015. So I think that's very important, especially coupled with the whole sequencing of things about PAAs and what can happen. This is the part that we can control, right? We can control changing to our PAA. We can control when the change to that amendment actually happens. So I just wanted to make you clear what our current plans are. Any questions about that? Nina, go ahead.
Just to bring up our last city council meeting where our lawyer made a comment about doing a piece. And so is this directly correcting the comment that we had from our earlier council meeting?
I believe it is, in that the formal action of a council to amend its comprehensive plan is that we are allowed to do that once a year. Tolan?
I think we should also just be clear, you mentioned my name. This is going to come before Land and Shore tomorrow, as a matter of fact. But that what we will be considering, I believe, is not the final comprehensive plan, but rather to direct the city's work towards that package. So it's not like we vote at the beginning and then the city goes and does a bunch of work. It's that we give direction towards what the city will spend some amount of time working on before we go to a full vote, right?
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. And I don't have more details on this. But yeah, the step you're addressing right now is formalizing, accepting the docket of changes. That'll kick off a body of work that Bob's staff will have to complete by analyzing these. Actually, they'll determine whether or not there may be a SEPA review on the various items. And this is all prescribed. It has to come back to our planning council. There must be the PPC. There must be a public hearing on it, and then that formal process then would have come back to a final set of amendments as an agenda bill for our council to consider. So yeah, so what you're addressing tomorrow is a finalization of the docket of proposed changes. It's not the acceptance of those. This is to kick off that process, which starts with the staff actually, doing the evaluation of each of the proposed changes, which is all prior to potential SEPA evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's analogous to if the council were to give formal direction in the budget process at the beginning of the year, right? And you had a document that you were going to present to the administration so that as they prepare the budget during the course of the year, they arrive in the fall with something that is in the direction the council is looking for. This is analogous to that.
Very much. It's setting the direction for the work to follow on from there.
Thanks.
Mary Lou?
Just to follow up on Councilmember Milligan's question, I thought the council, legal counsel to the city, had said that there would be some items on the docket that you could work on and do, like it doesn't all happen at the same time, so that some of these items get worked on earlier?
Kind of the happening of items and the formal adoption of amendment to the comprehensive plan are different things. So the actual formal change to the comprehensive plan by amendment, by agenda bill, by the city council can happen once a year.
Okay.
Any other questions? So, got ahead of myself. No, hold on.
Can I ask a question? If you scoot back 2 slides.
Which one?
Back to, oh, no, I'm sorry, there. When we're talking about in regards to the release of all or a portion of Klahanie PAA and its comp plan before Sammamish could add it. So the city has the ability to pick out bits and pieces, or is this something that is done by who?
You know, we're gonna
You're
talk
gonna
about
address
that.
that.
We're gonna address that, and I might have operator error here on it. Yeah. So here's the slide you didn't see. So this next slide is, I'm gonna step through. It's a build. I'm just gonna introduce 5 options that exist to us, and Eileen, yeah, this will be among that as well. And the point is that I want it to be very clear to everybody, both on the council and who's watching, that we're attempting to be very thorough, and it's only fair and just to the process that we actually take a look at and at least give some consideration to all the options available to us. So as these come up, you have any questions or comments about them? This is going to be the time where we get to discuss. Remember, the purpose for this conversation is to give a sense of the council to primarily to Land and Shore committee members who are sitting here amongst us, those being Mary Lou, Tola, and Stacy, but also for Bob and the administration as well. Okay.
Do we discuss also these options after public comment period or just now?
Yeah, what we're going to do is we'll have after public comment, we'll have another chance as a council to finalize it. Okay, so one of the options on the table is to do absolutely nothing. That means do not change the comp plan, do not schedule or pursue any type of change or any type of annexation, to do absolutely nothing. And so I can go through all 5 of these. We can discuss them once they're all out, but if anybody wants to make a comment about any one of these as we go along, please feel free. Okay, so I'm going to proceed. Another option available to us is to annex a portion of the PAA. So this is one of the options. We chose, when we put up our application to the Boundary Review Board, was to annex the entire PAA. We could have chosen to apply for a sub-area within the PAA. That does not require a comprehensive plan change. So we could have taken action and drawn some boundaries and say, hey, let's take the southern portion and let's apply to the Boundary Review Board, for an annexation event. We didn't do that. This past election was about the entire PAA. So that option is available to us actually without changing the comp plan. So the entire PAA would stay within our comprehensive plan, but we actually have this option available to us.
Which would require another vote.
Anytime, yeah. Well, a vote is one of the options that we have. And Eileen, when you're speaking, I hope that we'll have the mic available right in front of you when we do that. So the comment was that if we were to do this option, it would require another vote. So a vote, and actually this next one is one of the other options. Now, it's available to us by law. We actually did this back here in 2013 for the parcel, I want to say, the land at the middle school. Bob's nodding his head. So we did an interlocal agreement with King County, and it was requested also by the landowner, which was Issaquah School District. So we have an option to us. Again, I want to make sure everybody knows all the options available to us. We could pursue an interlocal agreement with the county to annex all or portion of the PAA. Mary Lou?
But you didn't finish that bullet point without changing the comp plan. That's available to us without changing the comp plan?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, Nina?
So either of these, do these go back to the Boundary Review Board, and is there any other body like that might not approve it, or is this an option open to us at our sole discretion?
Well, I know to go forward with annexation does require review of the Boundary Review Board, and the ILA process. Can you comment about Boundary Review Board if it was via ILA? He's looking towards that. Okay, thank you. That was Trish Hainanen from our Planning and Development Services Department. Trish's comment was that you still make an application, but the Boundary Review Board could choose not to review such an application.
Right. McCary Woods and the school, they chose not to have a meeting on because they were so small.
Okay, so those are the examples that she cited. McCary Woods is a plot of land adjacent to Forest Rim up on Squawk Mountain. It's undeveloped, it's wooded. And the school district was, well, that was a parcel of land owned only by the school district. It was the only owner, and they actually petitioned the city and requested the annexation. So in those conditions, perhaps it seems logical that no BRB review is necessary.
Can I clarify?
Okay?
But my main point was that it wasn't at our discretion that we could take the PAA and make it smaller, that there's still another body that needs to approve or decline it. And they may be not have a meeting, but they don't need to approve it.
To move towards annexation, yes. So we could, and so here's one of the fourth option is we could adjust our PAA boundaries and update the comp plan. And that's not an annexation. Right? We could choose to change the boundaries. We could look at those voting results and say, you know, that southern half or third, for example, you know, the numbers were so good that let's change our comp plan, let's adjust the boundary, and basically release the rest of it. Now but if we were then to pursue annexation, then that process, including the boundary review board, would kick in. Now, however, as I said, you know, any type of comp plan changes in this area does go through the GMPC, the Growth Management Planning Council, and they would have to make a policy recommendation, and it would have to be adopted by the county council as well. Tola?
Would you potentially not require an additional vote for the fourth option?
That isn't a vote. That's not an annexation.
Right. Sorry. Okay.
Now, once you make this adjustment, we could. I mean, if there was a logical conversation about making it such an adjustment, is the purpose to make the adjustment would be, you know, based upon the voting results, actually redraw a PAA that we think could succeed in an annexation vote. I mean, to me, that would be the reason that the policy decision, the guidance we would have. Mary Lou?
So in that last bullet then, that adjust PA boundary, update comp plan accordingly, there's no boundary review board in there. However, it frees up a remaining portion, meaning whatever portion wasn't selected and put back in our comp plan is what? It's
no longer claimed by us as a preferred annexation. That's correct.
Goes and claims it?
Well, it would have to, I mean, Sammamish would be the only candidate because they're an adjoining city.
So the boundary review board isn't involved in that process at all?
Yeah,
four.
they're involved with annexations.
Once you get to the point of having an annexation vote, but all this, they're not.
Right. Josh?
And I haven't seen option 5 yet. So far, in options 1, 2, and 3, that would either change, let's forget 1 for a moment, 2 or 3, that would change the boundaries of the PAA, but it would not result in releasing any portion of the PAA, or would it, under options 2 and 3? Specifically, 2 says without changing the comp plan. So it would not release, so it's annex without releasing. 3 is annex through ILA without releasing. 4 is release and change the comp plan.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
Two would be like a phased annexation, if you will.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so the 5th option on the table is just to remove the entire PAA from our comprehensive plan. I don't have any more options to put up here. I think, can anybody imagine an option that I didn't list?
Dare we
So-
suggest any?
So, my colleagues on the council, this is the time for us to have a conversation.
Well, is it a time to just ask clarifying questions? Because I sort of get the sense we just stay sort of factual for now and wait to hear what people say.
Sure.
I'm holding back sort of my opinion to let you
Okay,
hear
so what are your questions?
I don't have any.
Josh?
I'm happy to give my opinion based on what I've heard so far. And certainly, I welcome the public comment, and I'm open to being flexible and changing my mind depending on what we hear. For me, this issue has always been about numbers. when I looked at the entirety of the PAA, it did not make financial sense to the city of Issaquah. We don't have that in my mind anymore because of this vote and the previous vote some almost 10 years ago. I think the issue in terms of the entirety of the PAA, in my mind, is settled. Even Quebec stopped having referendums dealing with their territory. We need to stop too. But what stands out in my mind as a result of this vote is, in particular, a precinct, the precinct closest to our city, which in my mind makes the most geographic sense, voting somewhat overwhelmingly. I mean, 78% approximately, 77%. I mean, that's like park bond territory, right? That's really overwhelming to join the city of Issaquah. And obviously, you know, not everyone in that precinct wanted to. It wasn't 100% as a democracy. You know, the other precincts that came in at 50 or 60, it's interesting. I see 60 as a real threshold in this vote. You needed 60 to be absolutely sure annexation with bonded indebtedness. So 50 for me didn't cut it. 60 would have cut it, and there's a couple precincts that are pretty close. I believe, based on what I've heard so far, the results of this vote and the financial analysis that we've done, that it is very possible to pursue a small, limited portion of annexation of the PAA, limited to, and I'm not going to tell you the exact street addresses or driveways or lines, but somewhere in the range of the Brookshire precinct. I don't think that financially, to pursue that course of action would produce the same level of financial burden on the city that the entire PAA and the Fall City Road and the miles of curb, gutter, and sidewalks would have done. It's a very narrow area. It was overwhelmingly supportive of joining the city, and it shows to me a clear intent of those residents to become part of Issaquah. Consistent with that, that seems to fall in my mind under number 4, because I do think that the results of the election call for freeing up the remaining portion of the PAA, and that would allow essentially an equitable division where the will of the residents who were overwhelmingly supportive to join the city, I think it would obviously pass in an election, and that's why I'm concerned about the 60%, because it's that close. I wouldn't want to put an expanded PAA on the ballot and then have it fail and get, 59.9 and go through this whole process again. But if you're talking 77%, 78, that's pretty clear indication in my mind. And so the numbers to me check out. But where I stand now, and again, I'm open to changing my mind, option 4 seems like a very good way to go. We've heard from a lot of folks at the last council meeting and over the last few weeks who want to be released from Issaquah holding the PAA. And I think we need to honor that. We also need to honor the Brookshire residents who want to be part of our city. It makes geographic sense. It makes financial sense. That's where I stand at the moment. So that's my 2 cents for now.
Thank you, Josh. I will say it is my desire that prior to audience comments, because and I want anybody who wishes to speak is going to get an opportunity to speak at audience comments. And we know we're going to get comments for and we're going to get comments against. And so this is the opportunity for all of us on the council to share their perspective like Councilmember Scher did. Tola?
All right, then. So 4 years ago, I said that what mattered the most to me was getting an incorporation somewhere for the residents up in Klahanie. I'm a former resident. I voted yes to both questions in 2005. I lived in the Klahanie precinct. I'm part of the little finger that sticks up of the 60% plus. I was. And then nothing happened for 4 years, 5 years. Nothing happened on the Issaquah or the Sammamish side. So we kicked things into gear again, and here we are. And I said then that the only way that there's a failure out of this process is if 5 years goes by and those folks up there are still not incorporated somewhere. So the way I view this is, what can Issaquah do to help make sure that at the end of the day, Klahanie, that all the residents in the PAA are annexed somewhere? Because I do believe while clearly the majority of Klahanie residents do not want to be annexed to the PA. I keep saying Klahanie, and I apologize to those of you who are in the PAA but are not in Klahanie, which I realize is quite a few. So the question to me is, what can Issaquah do to help this process along? I don't really care whether somebody winds up in Issaquah or Sammamish. I think there's been, unfortunately, a lot of loose talk about how Issaquah wants this and Issaquah wants that. I think we want what is best for the folks up there. And so for me, I will be supporting whatever makes the most sense in terms of helping resolve this. And to me, I look at, you know, it's a little bit of a funny boundary, but that Southeast Klahanie Boulevard, and then the squiggle that I used to live on that's sometimes called 244th Place, and sometimes is called Southeast 43rd, and sometimes is called 246th, and sometimes is called 247th. That's actually not a bad boundary, and it's actually no worse of a boundary than taking a horizontal line across and trying to carve up Brookshire into some odd parcel, and that whole area voted 60% plus. And the argument for doing that is you have what is left, right, is the largest percentage of people who did not vote in favor of annexing to Issaquah. If you carve things up at some arbitrary line to attempt to take out Brookshire, you're left with a whole bunch of folks north of that line that wanted to be part of Issaquah, right? There is a contiguous chunk of land of people that voted 60% plus to become part of Issaquah. And I don't want to hand that problem to Sammamish. I would like to take the folks that knew what the target was, it was 60%, they voted in favor of it, and if it makes sense for us as a municipality, if we can do it without encumbering ourselves and encumbering the existing residents of Issaquah, if that parcel works out from a services standpoint, I think that's natural, and that hands to our neighbors to the north a population that is most primed to annex to Sammamish, because I think that the future of that whole area is to become part of municipalities, whether it's part of Issaquah or Sammamish.
Thank you, Tola.
Sure.
Stacy and then Mary Lou.
So one of my concerns when looking at the map, so if we were looking at annexing a smaller portion, what is the result in terms of the road there? Does it result in the city taking sort of a disproportionate share of the road? Because it looks like if it's a square here, roughly a square, and this is the area we're talking about, or are we just talking about Brookshire? When you were talking about a smaller, Josh, were you just talking about this down here?
In general, not down to a level of addresses, but yes.
And is this the road? Are these roads?
The road that you're showing on the left side is Issaquah Pine Lake Road, and the road that you're showing is Issaquah Falls City Road on the right.
Okay. So my concern is that you take a disproportionate share of the cost of improving a road without the commensurate area, I think, is my concern.
Okay. Thank you. Mary Lou.
I'm kind of back to a clarification just based on something that Tola said is, well, first a comment. I agree with Tola in what he said about it's what the residents had requested and what they want. But the timeliness piece is the clarification I need. Of all of the steps that you put up there, roughly do they have the same schedule, or are some of these much further out in terms of when they can be done or not? Like
Well,
this
these
number
aren't
4.
steps, these are options.
Right.
Right.
So number 4, is that something that could be accomplished in a short time frame, or is that something where the comp plan is changing and so this is whole next process wouldn't start till 2015 when we approve the comp plan?
You know, again, the June 2015 date is our current target for our comp plan update. So anything on here that is a comp plan update, the current target for us is June 2015.
Right. So these options have different schedules for when things would happen.
Yes, obviously there's no schedule on number 1.
Right.
An annexation, a portion of the PA number 2 doesn't require a comp plan change. And so and I don't know about a schedule for number 3, but 4 and 5 both are comp plan changes.
Okay.
Answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
I've heard a couple comments tonight. I do have another slide prepared. Eileen, did you want to say something?
Are you just wanting to continue with our opinions?
I do, and I'm going to put another slide up just for just thought-provoking in terms of, potential boundary considerations, right? I've already heard mentioned, well, let's look at where there was the 60% threshold. That's logical. That's understanding. If you look at the Nesbitt study, it's not a huge amount, but the retail sales tax comes from the shopping area. What about that? I mean, that's a revenue component. And Trish, maybe you can comment for me. These comments came from staff about other considerations and policy considerations, infrastructure coordination and service boundaries. Could you say a word about those?
Right, that would be if there's any stormwater issues or any, at the open house, we heard that there's some flooding and there's some problems with the water and the roads. And so would we be taking any of the problem areas that were identified for us at the open house with whatever boundary we would choose? I think we'd want to look at that.
Yeah, I can add to that. I think what number 3 and 4 was really like looking at how the whole system works over there. And so if we took a portion, you'd look at the storm sewer, for example, and you'd want to say, if you're drawing the line, not only does it need to make sense from the precinct perspective, but needs to make sense from an infrastructure perspective, because you've got to service that sewer line. If you're going to be plowing the streets, you want to make sure you're not just plowing one lane, because the line comes right down the middle. So you want to make sure that from that perspective, it makes sense. So, what we would do, I think, is if council directed us to look at any adjustments, is it would have to kind of, make logical and viable sense from both an infrastructure and service perspective that the police can adequately service the area, public works, ops, the infrastructure makes sense, all those types of things. So that would be 3 and 4 is what our thinking was on those pieces.
And thank you, Bob. Number 5 is just there are boundaries not related to precincts. There are homeowners associations. I got that right, HOAs. And so, I think it would just be the prudent thing to do to consider those if we considered an adjustment. I heard some comments. I think Stacy maybe even used the word feasibility, but I think I could extract from the comments I've already heard that really I'd need more information. And that's the placeholder that's up there for number 6, is that, there's a body of work. The Nesbitt study looked at the entire PAA, and really to make an adjustment, and the purpose of that was to all stakeholders to understand what the ramifications would be, both from the city in terms of our cost and staff and service levels, and also potential, revenue and the overall, match of those over a 5 and 10 year plan. And, that was a very exhaustive study, and it seems to me that any consideration of making an alteration then would require, speaking for myself, I would want the same kind of information. And so, in one way, if the general, comments indicate interest in option number 4, in a way, we would then we would take another step to formally request the administration to complete a kind of a restudy, kind of this feasibility based upon, get an update of the Nesbitt study based upon what we already have. And so I've posed it there deliberately as a question, is that, another way you could look at this is that, is the council, does this seem compelling? Are we going to ask that go from here and say let's put an agenda bill together to authorize an update to the Nesbitt study, of which the outcome of which we don't know what it is. It may determine it's feasible, it's not feasible, but again, it would come back before us to determine to accept it or not, just like we did before, and make a final decision if we wanted to pursue it any further. So I remind you that. That is, all of those options were, I think, were around number 4. I compiled that list, and with some input from Trish as well, around option number 4. So before we go back to you, Stacy, I think Eileen was going to make some comments. And could you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
if you're wanting to continue with our opinions here. As you look at, for me, I looked at the map, and of course, listening to Councilmember Scher's comment about Brookshire, well, if you look at the map, in my opinion, you can't necessarily eliminate Ranch and Klahanie precincts, and I'm not sure exactly where the boundary lines are for those, but according to the vote, they're all 60-plus in their voting for those, and their literally streets are contiguous to each other. So it is a block of not necessarily just Brookshire, but that whole square block, as Councilmember Goodman was saying. And I think if you look at the numbers, I think the voters of that area were making a comment. They made a statement. They were definitely wanting to come into the city of Issaquah, as the voting showed, with a 64 to 75 plus vote for coming to Issaquah. So I think it's important to take a look at their desire. There is one other little leg that goes up through there, but that Klahanie Square seems to be the most contiguous and the easiest probably to look at as a block that I think would be a benefit to Issaquah, and they have spoken. I mean, even totally, if you take a look at the vote, it's only 34 votes. That's not a mandate in any means by any of the areas. So I would like more information, as you've put forward. There's a lot of information that we need to have in regards to where are the sewer lines and where are the homeowners association lines, and how can we do this easily. We need more information, is my opinion. But definitely, I think there's a nice big square there that have spoken. They've spoken by their vote, and they're spoken as they come to City Council, and you hear them in the community that they were still very disappointed not to have become a part of Issaquah. So I would like some more information.
Thank you. Go ahead. Nina?
Thank you. Yes, I had some opening thoughts about this, though I really look forward to the public comment period. And I've enjoyed the process all along and getting to know these potential neighbors and the people who have come and addressed us. It's been a fulfilling process to me. I first want to comment on timing, and it seems like everyone's in a hurry, and I know we're all anxious to finish it or to be somewhere, but really this is a perpetual decision to be made, and if it takes another year, well, heck, that's nothing in the life of the cities of the area, and I want to give it all the time that it needs. And I know it's frustrating for some to hear that, but I want to do it because I think it's worth the investment. It's too big of a decision. Now, before I came on the council, and I'm the newest member and the least informed of all of you, but I did keep up on this topic, and it was important to me, just as a member of Issaquah, and I'm a resident of Issaquah Highlands, so it's very near me too. So I thought about it quite a bit, and I hadn't yet been won over for the entire PAA because the geography didn't quite seem to make sense to me, and the financial considerations were defined in a 10-year outlook, and sure, it looked like we had some margin for 10 years, but that's not how long this is going to last. And so I wanted more information about how this is going to go forward even beyond that. And that's not because I don't want members of Klahanie to be part of my city, but I felt like my responsibility was to Issaquah and to their well-being, and the financial argument is of course one that would be a base and essential decision to make. Going forward, looking at possibly splitting up and taking just one PAA, part of the PAA and not all of it, there are a lot of things that we can talk about there, but I think the first one, and almost a deal breaker for me, is that although I was a little skeptical about the long-term financial viability of taking on the PAA, it's almost entirely voided for me now that it would just be the portion of the PAA that has low-density housing. There isn't the revenue benefits of having the commercial district or even a higher density residential is not in that part. Now, before coming to this meeting last week, I went and drove this little boundary, and to the point where the eastern boundary of what's called Klahanie, the squiggly, almost arterial neighborhood street, it still didn't look different on one side to the other. And though we have this distinguishing line here on a color-coded map, I didn't see that. I didn't see it when I was out there. These folks are neighbors. And I just don't know what to think about that. And there are forms of governance in homeowners associations, services and infrastructure would add a complication that I'd certainly need more information before I split these folks off from one another. That's generally, I'm looking forward to hearing the comments from the audience. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Did you have other comments?
Just have a
Ellen?
quick question. We talked about the updating the Nesbit study to some degree. Do we have a cost estimate on that?
We do. Depending on where the line is drawn, the estimated cost was about $5,000 to $7,000. So it's all, he has all the data. It's all up to date with the most current property valuations. And it's all GIS based, so it's really just a matter of redetermining the lines on the revenue side. The expense side then would be part of that analysis of, infrastructure and service options and where you draw the line. And that would take some additional time with staff to make that determination.
As a follow-on, if I may, timing?
Nesbit thought he could turn that around fairly quickly, maybe 3 weeks.
Thank you. Josh?
So I hadn't seen that slide that you put up when I made my comments, the one with the list of 6 or 7 items on there. Yeah, I just had a couple of points when I was looking at that. So Nina makes a great point about the cost and revenue in terms of the more territory you take, the higher that cost is going to be to servicing the infrastructure. And you're not going to be able to offset it with any sort of revenue. And that's why, for me, if you narrowly tailor the line, and I don't see why north of 238th Way is necessary, because there's a fairly significant gap when you look at a map in territory there. And again, I'm not going down to street address here. When I was in college, I lived in North Bellevue, and on one side of the road there was Redmond, and one side of the road there was Bellevue. Seemed to get along just fine, and they plowed the streets just fine, and they fixed the traffic lights just fine, and there were houses on both sides of the street up there near Microsoft. So I don't think it's necessarily dispositive in terms of where a particular neighborhood lies, although, as noted, there are some HOA considerations. But the more territory you take, just for the sake of taking it because you can, the more cost you're going to incur. And the shopping center, the shopping center's east of the North Fork. That's not even in, from what I can tell on the map, the measure of overwhelming support that we saw in the vote. So I don't even know how you get there. The other thing I want to point out is it's a slippery slope, because when you said 60%, that was item number 1 on there. This question that we have before us, I don't think it should be strictly governed by the vote, in the sense that we're not going to be bound by whether it's 50%, 60%, or 70% per se, because wherever we draw the lines, it's a slippery slope. If you look at the actual results of the election, you could go to the Bowood precinct to the north of Ranch. 163 for, 171 against. 8 people. If you say, well, we're not going to annex Bowood, we're not going to go that far, we'll only go as far as Ranch, there's 163 people who are not going to like that decision. And if you say, well, let's do the Klahanie precinct, well, there were 101 people there against annexation to Issaquah. So you're going to have 101 people mad at you, at least of those who voted. So it's a slippery slope, because no matter which direction you go, there was no 100% precinct. There was no 100% neighborhood. My concern is really on the cost-benefit analysis, that if you draw the line bigger and bigger, the cost is going to increase. And that's what the Nesbit study, in my mind, told us. And if you go past 238th and you start going up to Klahanie, well, why not go up to Bowood? Why not go out, to Marjorie? Let's go to some of these other precincts or neighborhoods, because it's hard to draw the line. That's a real slippery slope. So, when you look at 77, 78%, that's pretty telling. Beyond that, that's a tough sell.
Tola?
A couple of things. Yeah, the only place where you get 100% is North Korea, by the way. That's the only place where you get a 100% vote. Although there were some precincts here that were 100% against.
Yeah, the Duthie Hill one was 100%.
I want to mention the shopping center, because I, like several other people, it's entirely beyond the zone that had a high confidence support to become part of Issaquah. And really, when you look at it, you know, one of the things that's been bandied about is that, like, Issaquah wants the revenue up there. It's not, at least to my way of thinking, it matters in terms of can you balance things out. But the shopping center is like $60 million of retail revenues. It's not, in the grand scheme of things, it's small compared to the vast property assessments that are up there. So I don't believe that it would make an overwhelming difference in how the numbers come out for looking at this smaller potential parcel. You know, in terms of low density housing, this is a mini South Cove, right? I mean, these houses, I had, you know, a 4,000 square foot piece of property up there. That's smaller probably than what you find in South Cove, and we seem to be pretty happy with South Cove. So I'm not particularly concerned about that. I do want to say one thing about timing. I hope folks in the audience at home, I hope they're hearing, I think every single council member has said to some extent that what matters to them is making right for the folks up there that are in our current PAA, and some folks weigh that more heavily against the issues for existing residents in the city. I think none of us want to do something that would hurt the existing residents of Issaquah. But I think you've heard tonight that all of us, you know, one of our very highest priorities is doing right by the folks up there. Having said that, we have to take the time to do whatever we're going to do right. You know, folks up there first voted against annexation 23 years ago. They voted against it again 22 years ago. The Klahanie board said no to incorporating in Sammamish 16 years ago. They voted no again 9 years ago. If it takes us another year, I just need people to understand that they need to believe that this council, when they say, here's our priorities, that's really what our priorities are, and that whatever we go about doing, if it takes us a little bit longer, I understand that people are excited at this point about potentially incorporating into one city or the other, but it's really critical that we take our time. This is not a council that moves, you know, with unseemly haste, and shouldn't in this case either, merely because everyone is very excited at this point. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I just chime in?
Hold on, Eileen. Eileen.
Just a quick comment. In regards to Councilmember Scher's talking about sort of drawing these lines, and Bowood being one of the precincts, not necessarily by precinct. I think as we look at this, we need to take a look at probably more residential lines as they are drawn around as far as the Klahanie, but not sticking with precincts. And I hope no one misunderstands what we're saying here. We're not talking about drawing a line around some precinct number and leaving the neighbor to your north or to the next door of you out from any possible opportunity if we work through this. And I repeat everybody's comments I've heard here tonight in regards to, we really do need to take our time, make sure that the next step is correct and will work for all.
Nina?
I just wanted to clarify, since Tola and Josh followed up, thank you very much, that I did not mean to add to the 3 precincts at the bottom, the commercial area or even the higher density housing, because they weren't in an approval zone, but rather to point out that when you take the whole and then you only take part of it, it changes the financial equation, and we don't know the answer to that yet. That's what I mean.
So I certainly am getting the sense that a significant number of the council are interested in getting more information about a possible adjustment. You know, I've thought a lot about this quite a bit as well. I tell you, drawing the line would be pretty hard. Because the truth of the matter, we don't have household voting. We don't really know. We don't have one house vote or the other. I think drawing the line would be extremely difficult. And if there's been tension and stress and hard feelings so to date, I think the line would resurface that significantly. I do appreciate the comments about, you know, taking the long term. You know, for the life of a city, one more year isn't, you know, if that's what it takes, that's important. So I have a lot of reservations about asking drawing a line. I'm in fact I have given a lot of consideration the votes and speaking to residents of the area in Brookshire, in the south area as well, and listened very closely. And it's for me, the easy decision would be to ask for more information and to ask the administration to hire Nesbitt and make an adjustment. When I look at the entire calculus of the original study and what we what it said, at first I was okay with the lack of addressing the roads, but I'm not okay with that anymore. That is part of the ownership of this area. In particular, Fall City Road. There would be, some duty and responsibility. We really didn't get an assessment of that in the Nesbitt study, and I think in terms of complexity and cost and all of that, that's unfortunate because we don't have that information. And so the idea of taking a little bit more time, which I'm sensing there's a number of people who are very much interested in that. And so that's the last kind of question before audience comments I'm going to ask. It's just I want to get more clarity on the interest in actually taking a couple more weeks and coming back here in a month or 6 weeks or something and considering potentially looking at the a revised study that just looked at a subset of those areas. And I agree that the precinct data is just precinct data. It's not the lines. And because we don't know about specific, voters. So I'd like just to go around one more time before audience comments and get a sense of, because I get a sense that many of you are very interested in asking the administration to do that refined study. Tolan?
Sooner or later, we would need to know that information before making a vote. I cannot support any path towards annexation that has a net negative impact on the existing residents of Issaquah. And so I think it's a good idea to do it sooner rather than later, because I would hate to see the city do a bunch of work and then we find out that if it were to have a negative potential impact and then you have a divisive council situation. So for that reason, I do like the idea of seeing that information sooner rather than later.
Right, and so in my mind, what that looks like would be a study being completed and then us making either accepting it or rejecting it, which would be, I'm trying to get to an answer, right? And if there's a study and it seems to be financially feasible and all the other comments we're going to get about that, and we would want to proceed with that, making an adjustment, then think about that road. The other road would be do a study and decide it's not feasible, and we're done. We're going to choose. We've done our diligence. We've honored the desires of citizens, perhaps. But again, we have, and I appreciate what you said, Tola. I take that very seriously, and those I've spoke to have heard me say many times that our number one obligation is to the existing city residents of Issaquah, and we all need to keep that in mind. But if we were to do a study of that sub area and not like the results, the council said no, we're not going to do this, then I think. By the comments that I've heard, I haven't heard a lot of comments about options 1, 2, and 3 in terms of a preferred option. Then we would be left with option number 5. So, if anybody else has, I really appreciate anybody else has any other comments to share about that. Josh.
Well, I guess I was the only one who had a different view originally of our obligation to city residents. And I didn't support this in the beginning, but. I guess in terms of doing a redo or some aspect of the Nesbitt study, I think it's fair to get more information. I agree with the comments that we want to do it right. At the same time, they're sort of beating a dead horse. And I don't think that the residents of this PAA want to spend another year paying county taxes. I think really they want to go somewhere. And I think a lot of them want to go to Issaquah, and a lot of them want to go to Sammamish, but I really don't think a lot of them want to stay in King County. And, we want to do what's right by the residents of the PAA, and yet at the same time, we want to just kind of keep leaving them in limbo. We have the Nesbitt study. It tells us, yes, about the entire area. If we're looking at just, and I say Brookshire, not to mean precinct Brookshire per se, but wherever the lines get drawn, and again, I think 238th is a fairly reasonable line. We're not talking about the full suite of Issaquah Falls City Road improvements outlined by King County, the five $40 million improvements. We're not talking about 3 miles of curb, gutter, and sidewalk that Nesbitt didn't account for. I don't think we need Nesbitt to tell us that it makes sense and that 77% of the people in that precinct supported Issaquah annexation. What I haven't heard around the table is anyone seeming to suggest that outside of those 3 precincts that voted, at least above 60%, that we would still want to pursue annexation there. And what that tells me is there seems to be a fair amount of at least initial support for releasing a pretty significant portion of the PAA. Whether it, is outside those 3 precincts or outside of 1, we can negotiate that out. But I think for anyone living outside those 3 precincts, I haven't heard anyone here suggest that we should go east of the North Fork, north of Klahanie Drive, or any portion thereof. And I think really that puts that off the table and really starts us focusing on number 4. But, again, if we want to be sensitive to the interests of the residents, I'd like to frankly just see it on a November vote and get this over and done with, because they're continuing to pay county taxes and they want to be in a city. They really do.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Short one.
Go ahead.
I mean, one of the things that's a challenge here is we don't really know, right? We don't know of the 49% that supported annexation, what percentage of that would have supported it if it was Sammamish. Of the 51% that said no, we don't know what percentage of that would have supported it if it was Sammamish, or whether there's just maybe 49% of the people want to be part of some city somewhere, and 51% still want to stay in the county. It's unlikely, but what I'm getting at is we can't predict, right? All we know is that there was an area that a supermajority wanted to be part of Issaquah, and there was the rest of it that was not, right? So I think we have to be careful about extrapolating. I think there is a non-trivial fraction. My own personal opinion is there is a non-trivial fraction of people in the PAA who do not want to be part of any municipality. I think a strong majority does, but I think that there's some percentage that is happy to stay in the county.
All right, thank you. Mary Lou, and then we're going to move on.
Okay, just back to a couple of things. One is I want to make sure that we listen to the residents up there, and it sounds like they agree. Certain geographic areas, there's a majority that wants to join Issaquah. Others, I agree with Tola, we don't exactly know what they want to do. I think when we define the Nesbitt study, if we go ahead with it, I think we look at those 3 areas that were over 60%, and we provide some direction to them that says that's not exactly the boundary, but we want to know if there is a manageable boundary in there where there is revenue neutral impacts and no service impacts to the residents that already exist in Issaquah. So looking at that, I really am strongly supporting the option 4. And if the Nesbitt study comes back with data that doesn't support that, then I'm number 5. The other 3 I'm not considering.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarity. Stacy?
I would agree with that. I think what I've heard around the table is some interest in possibly considering a smaller portion, and in order for us to make that decision, we just have to have additional information. So if we're not going to get the additional information, then I think we've necessarily narrowed our choices. And so if the council is interested in a smaller portion, then I think we need more information, and I would support that.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to open it up to audience comments. I do ask that you come to the mic. Now, this is not a formal commitment. If I could just see by a show of hands those who think they want to speak, because this is going to decide if we're going to do 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, so I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, we got over about 12 to 15 hands in the area. Okay, and so we're about to start, but I've just got a request from someone who doesn't want to miss a single word, and I mean that earnestly, for a 5-minute, or let me see, that clock up there says 8:18, and how much?
I had a pen malfunction.
Okay.
I can be back in 4 minutes.
So when that clock says 8:22, we start.
What happened? Well, he kept playing with it.
Oh, his pen?
Yeah, sort of.
It blew up on him? You're welcome. Can I ask you a question?
We currently remain still on the.
Face.
What happened?
My pen blew up. All of a sudden, I realized there was red ink all over the barrel and the.
Okay, let's get started.
Did you see about volume?
Just a moment. Okay, I'm not sure who the AV person for the city is up there, but there's been a request to turn up the volume of the sound over the speakers. So if you could, it's down, wait. We got a subject matter expert to my right. He knows where the volume switch is.
No, I just know it's down here.
He knows it's down here. Flash the red light if you know where. He comes running down the stair. Here he comes. Come on, Bob, let's learn.
Whisper below Seahawks, somewhere in that. There's something over here. Yeah, I saw it. For last night.
Want me to do a sound check? Tell me when. Is that any louder? Now, I've been speaking right into the mic. Oh, that sounds louder to me. Is that better? Is that louder? Rowan, can you hear that? Thank you. Thank you.
We doing 2 minutes or 3 minutes, Paul?
2. everybody's comments are important, and we welcome them all. There's a lot of interest here tonight, and I know it may be difficult, but I would ask everybody to honor the request to keep your comments up to 2 minutes. Just please offer your name and your affiliation, and I ask that you just stay on topic. And yes, people get one opportunity to speak. So, who would like to speak? Ma'am, you, and then the gentleman standing behind her.
Do you want, you're gonna.
Hello, I'm Kirsten O'Malley, and I'm the chair of Klahanie Choice, which I'm sure you've heard of. We're a very friendly neighborhood grassroots group that really believes in having the best future for Klahanie and our neighbors. So one of the things I want to just get out there is that we really feel like we have some momentum right now. All of us are very interested in getting out of King County, and we're really excited about becoming a part of a city. There were many of us who voted no because we felt that it made more sense on a number of levels to be a part of Sammamish. But there are also people who voted yes, who really just wanted to be a part of the city. A lot of those people are coming up to me now and saying, hey, I voted yes and it failed, but we are ready to go with Sammamish. We're very excited about it. We want to get out of King County. So we're kind of shifting now to really supporting people getting out of King County and into a city. And right now we really feel it makes sense to go to Sammamish. You know, you could annex bits and pieces and kind of carve it up and adjust the PAA boundaries, but I want to make sure that you really understand the gravity and the complexity that you're bringing to this, and also the delays for us in getting into a city. And that, of course, is the most important right now. You know, we voted as a whole, and this measure lost as a whole. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page there. There's always going to be a neighborhood or the guy down the street who voted yes. You're never going to be able to figure that out by drawing lines. And unfortunately, that also means that we're going to possibly have to wait an entire year to get out of King County.
30 seconds.
We just encourage option number 5, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next. And who wants to go after? Who wants to go next? Okay, starting over here. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Tom Vance. Pardon me, Tom Vance. I'm the current mayor of Sammamish. And I don't know, do you need my address?
Go ahead.
I come here tonight, I'm a little nervous, so I'm going to think of you as the Rotary, if you don't mind. But I come here tonight, if you will, as an ambassador from Sammamish. A few days ago, I began a dialogue with one of your council president, Paul Winterstein. We spent about 2.5 hours together, and frankly, we didn't get to Klahanie until the last half an hour or so, maybe 40 minutes or thereabouts, as you recall. What we really wanted to talk about, and what I wanted to talk about in asking for the meeting with Paul, was to talk about areas of interest where we can work together in the future. As cities who are next to each other, have a lot of common goals. We talked about a number of those issues. I think one that came up is I know you've spoken not so much tonight. I guess you did talk a little bit tonight about your ambitions, with residential and commercial growth in the city. Part of that is an effort to improve transportation along the I-90 corridor. Including transit and roads and everything that comes with that, maybe even light rail someday, perhaps. That's all good for Sammamish, and we feel that very much. We think that going forward, in the local, regional, and state levels, we can work together to accomplish some of that. So I did want to make that comment. I do also want to again, referencing my conversation with Paul, talk about at least one issue that I would suggest. I'm not trying to persuade you to anything, but really talk about one issue that is perhaps, among many issues, the basic interest for us in Sammamish. We guess that about quarter, if not more, of our residents use Issaquah Pine Lake Road and Issaquah Fall City Road to get in and out of the city. And unfortunately, right now, Issaquah Fall City Road has become a huge roadblock to folks getting from my city into I-90 and getting to their jobs. This is also a problem for residents in Klahanie. Unfortunately, overflow is pushing commuters onto Klahanie streets, and that's causing problems, and I think the problems will multiply as time goes on. We think that it's very important that this road be fixed and the capacity issues solved as soon as possible. And I would also note that the confluence of those two roads leads to some important areas of Issaquah, including the Highlands and that commercial district. If you continue down to East Lake Sammamish Parkway and all of the commercial and other residential areas down there. We think that's a win for Sammamish. We think it's a win for Klahanie, and it's a win for Issaquah if we can get that road fixed. And that's one of our major motivations. So thank you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So I'm Rob Young. I'm actually in charge of the Klahanie Political Action Committee and started this annexation process about 3 years ago. And I wasn't going to speak because my wife said I dressed a little sloppy tonight, so don't mind that. Anyway, I wanted to clarify something of what a couple of the council people said, because not only going around to the neighborhoods in Klahanie, PAA, in petitions, going around and doing flyers and handouts and sitting and talking to people on a Saturday afternoon, I would say that very few people, maybe one out of maybe 100 or 200, didn't want to be in a city. We actually had people, and I could point them out on a map where they were. The rest of the people just wanted to be annexed. And actually they were kind of concerned why they weren't annexed for all this period of time. I've lived there 24 years. I've only been thinking about annexation for about the last 3, but now I wonder that myself. You know, why haven't we been annexed? And I think that's a challenge for, you know, maybe a different meeting or something, or write in a book or something that people would read. But anyway, my concern is just to pass that information on of what people really think, because it's the same thing that Kirsten said. Which pick? I mean, I would love to be sitting here and saying, hey, pick number 3. But I wanted number 3 a year ago. I wanted number 3 2 years ago. But we ended up having to vote, and the vote's always a problem up on that plateau. I don't think anything's ever passed except a bond issue for schools. So anyway, make a long story short, I'd just as soon let everybody know that the people I represent anyway want to be annexed. So whatever that means for the council, I have a feeling it means probably something close to number 5. That wasn't the goal, but that was one of my goals when I started, was to be annexed to a city at some point, and at least I've learned the government process that maybe leads to that. But anyway, I want to thank you for all the process. I've enjoyed all the relationships. I hope it's not the last time I come to the Issaquah City Council meeting. I don't think so, but anyway, that's my 2 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name's Rowan Hines, and I'm a former mayor here, so I've been involved for a while. I wanted a couple of things. Sammamish really has ignored Issaquah, Klahanie, since the last election 8 years ago, up until the BRB hearing, and then the last 2 weeks before the election. And the only reason we're here tonight is because there's been 2 egregious misrepresentations immediately before the vote, 8 years ago and this last month. And that's really unfortunate, okay? In spite of that misrepresentation, okay, 51% of the people in the area didn't exercise their right to vote at all. So I wouldn't put a lot of stock in the numbers about who voted where and didn't, okay. 51% didn't vote at all. I would bet that a majority of the 51%, as well as the 49% that did vote, would favor not having to change their address. Okay? Think about what that means. I would take a bet with anybody on that. 51% did not vote, so don't put a lot of stock in the numbers. Sammamish is not an urban center. they will never become an urban center. They have no control of the transportation facilities that urban centers have. That's why they develop in the first place. If Klahanie annexes to Issaquah, they will focus outward to Issaquah in an urban center. If they are forced to annex to Sammamish, they will focus inward, away from any urban centers, which are Redmond and Issaquah. Okay. Act in haste, repent at leisure. If you look back 50 years from now, it'll be obvious to everyone Issaquah is the right answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would else like to? Sir?
Mr. President, council members, distinguished guests, my name is Brian Garvey. Thanks for giving me the time to speak tonight. I live at 3723 245th Avenue Southeast. That's right deep in the heart of Klahanie. I guess I represent the Thrush District here tonight. I'm here to urge the council to release us from the PAA. You know, on the one hand, there's no greater example of the democratic process than having the opportunity to vote twice on the same issue. Clearly, we're in the affected area. We do not want to be annexed by the city of Issaquah, judging by the votes. On the other hand, I can see nothing more undemocratic than not letting us out of the PAA after these two votes against. During the weeks prior to the vote, I had a yard sign in my front yard. I live on a busy street, 245th Avenue, and I'm a dog walker. And I was stopped several times by people asking me, why do I have the vote no sign in there? And clearly, a lot of people were, like in most elections, uninformed. Some people thought it was basically, yes, we're going to go to Sammamish. They didn't really know what it was all about, and not surprised at all that only 49% or whatever it was, 50% of the people voted. So, but let's not get hung up on the numbers. I think if you held the vote, though, again today, more people would vote no against the annexation because they become more informed. I think Brookshire, Klahanie, and Ranch, I bet if you looked at the school district boundaries, you'd find that those are probably closer to the Issaquah High School boundaries. Kids in those three neighborhoods in the Klahanie area, in those neighborhoods up there, their kids go to Issaquah High School, which might lead to them voting that way. Roads are an issue. That needs to be addressed sooner than later. I don't know how that gets worked out between the two cities, but clearly the county is not taking care of the situation. Something needs to be done there. That's a main issue for me. The other issue is I think it's great that the city of Issaquah has the plan to do the development that they are, but up where I live in Klahanie, we're closer to Sammamish, and we are a bedroom community, residential, and I do not wish to be associated with this big development. So please take the steps to help us move along with the process and release us. And studies can be studied and studied again. It takes time and money and staff to keep doing this, so I just would hope that we would expedite this process and let us go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak? Sir?
Hi, my name is Mike Foss. I live in Brookshire Estates, which is part of the Brookshire Precinct and is also part of the Klahanie PAA. We are in that 77.63% vote yes. We've been there for 14 years and have always considered ourselves part of Issaquah. My position is Issaquah has spent years, significant dollars, 2 votes, researching the ROI, return on investment, of the PAA with a strong commitment and positive action. While they could have simply just annexed us, they chose to allow the vote. I believe Issaquah deserves a return on this investment. The 3 precincts with over 60% yes bring plus or minus 2,000 citizens, plus or minus 300 homes, with immediate revenue and limited maintenance. We have no parks recreation, probably minimal police coverage beyond what is current, maybe 1 additional officer up in the Highlands. Fire protection is already there, as is water and sewer. These precincts want to be part of Issaquah. Brookshire was 77.63%, Ranch was 64.98%, and Klahanie precinct was 60.85%. These precincts are willing to take on their share of the bonded indebtedness of Issaquah and don't want to be part of Sammamish. They are attached to each other and also attached to Issaquah, making an easy add-on to the city. The three precincts bring established high-value neighborhoods with immediate revenue and significantly reduced cost, in our opinion, to the city versus the combined PAA. Yes, road maintenance would be needed, but not immediately in this area, and would not constitute an overwhelming expense, as the road distance added as part of Issaquah would be minimal as compared to the PAA as a whole. Issaquah Falls City Road is already 4 lanes through probably 50% of the road up towards the other side. Issaquah Pine Lake is already reasonably good condition in that area where you would be assessing that. And these improvements, there are already some already planned and timed for King County and Sammamish at Southeast 48th and 238th Way Southeast. The cost benefit for this action is not unlike a developer building 300 homes on a vacant land within Issaquah, requiring additional water, sewer, police coverage, road construction, and maintenance, with the primary difference being that the revenue for the precincts annexed is immediate. The homes are built out, sold, and generating tax revenue. Issaquah has the right to annex and reap the benefits from bringing positive, want-to-be citizens into the city. The short and long term, a winner for both parties.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Sir?
Yes, my name's Tom Harmon, and I live at 4369 243rd Avenue Southeast in Klahanie. Just a few comments. I've written a number of letters to the editor, and also in my submission to the Boundary Review Board, I did talk about boundaries and school district boundaries. I am a precinct committeeman for the precinct of Ranch. And I live in Klahanie, in the Klahanie subdivision at the north end of Ranch. The southern end of that precinct is contained in Brookshire. Actually, the school boundary follows the southern boundary of the Klahanie HOA. It's the way it follows. My son went to Skyline High School. I understand all the Brookshire kids went to Issaquah High School and feel identity to Issaquah. Precincts were formed to try to come up with an equal number of voters back when we had voting places and so forth. Just about all of them you will find will follow the roads. So then you get to a situation like 243rd that I live on, my house across the street's in the Klahanie precinct, I'm in the Ranch precinct. Then you get to a whole, if you're going to have this precinct in Issaquah and this precinct in Sammamish, who's going to manage the roads? There's a lot of things that need to do. The HOA boundary more follows backyards. There's somebody's backyard fence is the boundary and has at least a lot more to do that. In my letter to the editor, I said maybe the Brookshire people, they seem to be happier in Issaquah, or I would be happier in Sammamish. So that's something to think about. But in the last election, it went 67% for annexation, where 46% voted for bonded indebtedness. And my feeling is, you were to put the three precincts into an election, it would probably, might get over 50, but probably get under 60. So you have the issue of, will you bring it in with to accept the debt of the city? And I'm sure the Brookshire HOA would probably get above 60%, but But at least when you try to split it, you get into a bigger mess. And I'll repeat basically what other people said. All this trying to determine boundaries is just going to slow down the whole operation, and we're going to be in King County for another couple of years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to speak? Is there anybody else? Sir?
Good evening, council members. My name is Olivier Fontana. I'm an 11-year resident in Klahanie. And when I mean Klahanie, the rest of my little talk, I mean the Klahanie Homeowner Association. I don't want to talk for Brookshire, Greenwood, all those guys. Truly appreciate the thoughtful process that clearly you guys are going through. I voted no, and I think you should go for option 5. Now, the 2 points I wanted to make is, first, be very careful about data. In my job, I work a lot with data. The only data valid here is the total sum. Everything else are well guessed from anyone. Some people said, I will bet that people will think that, and that. I can give you an example. I wouldn't care whether we will move today, tomorrow, or in 5 years into a city or not. People didn't have a real choice in the sense of being able to choose between 2 cities or nothing. It was Issaquah or nothing. So the choice that people had was not a full choice as you would expect from something like this. I know it's not possible. I'm not pushing that. My last point is, as a Klahanie resident, Klahanie is my village. This is where my 3 kids are growing up for the last 11 years. They've been to schools there. They're going to Easter egg hunts where they're going to the swimming pool. Whatever you do, don't break up Klahanie, the homeowner association. Leave it together. I can't talk for the others. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? Thank you.
Good evening, David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. No one wants to stay in King County, and that money from those taxpayers is leaving the area and isn't being used on the roads or the parks or anything else in Klahanie. HOA boundaries make a lot more sense if you start getting into boundaries. The precinct boundaries don't make any sense. Brookshire's in 3 different precincts, and but as you go up, the road improvements from the intersection of Issaquah Falls City and Issaquah Pine Lake Road up to 48th, $7.5 million just for that section. If you want to start acquiring more property north of 48th, you're going to be picking up significant road costs, especially on that section. You also got, of course, the Issaquah Falls City Road sections you're going to end up picking up. Internal roads and the cost of those kinds of things were not addressed in the Nesbitt study. If the north boundary, if their north precincts had voted to not be in, would you have chopped them off and said, oh, you can go to Sammamish? I have my doubts, especially since you would have had it under 10,000 people and you wouldn't have got the state subsidy. So I think looking at the whole PAA, option 5 makes the most sense. But if you're going to start looking at chopping things, drawing lines, don't be going down the middle of a bunch of residential streets, which is what the precinct maps do. 48th was a discussion before. It makes a lot of sense. It's mostly backyard fences coming together on that extension of 48th. But if you do that, you're picking up the whole $7.5 million of the Issaquah Pine Lake Road.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Sir?
Good evening, folks. My name's Dick LaRue. I live at 4652 238th Way Southeast in Brookshire. I'm very much in favor of annexing to the city of Issaquah. This process has been going on for, give or take, about 10 years now. And we, like you, I'm sure, would love to see it brought to a conclusion that serves the needs and the benefit of the people of Issaquah and the people of the PAA as well. We've always supported that. We just finished a campaign. It was kind of nasty, to tell you the truth. And by the way, I'm from Boston, and we know nasty politics. Boston, I think, is the only major city in the United States ever re-elected a mayor while he was in jail for embezzling the city. So we know how this goes. Yet, in the face of a pretty negative campaign, we got some pretty substantial positive voting. To my take, getting anywhere close to 50% positive vote was one heck of an achievement in the atmosphere we were dealing in. Let me talk to you something about consistency. Everybody's been throwing numbers out here. I'd like to offer you a number. In 2005, I think the most important number was when people asked, do you want to become part of Issaquah? 67% said yes. Let me offer you another one. Brookshire. We asked the actual Brookshire community. 95% voted yes. You know, this has got to tell you something. It's got to tell you how loyal and how dedicated we are in that area. Now, when I saw the precinct by precinct vote, I don't think that can be ignored, and I hope you don't ignore it. You have, in fact, a very, very loyal contingency in those three precincts, and I think others as well, that want desperately to become part of Issaquah. In truth, I'm going back to 2005 now, we love Issaquah. We would love very much to send our tax dollars to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Sir? Yes, you.
My name is John Dimtroff, and I'm a resident of Brookshire Estates. I live at 24011 Southeast 46th Place. First, I want to thank the council for giving me an opportunity to speak, and also for demonstrating your concerns for the residents of at least Brookshire, but obviously for the rest of PAA. I'm in the small percentage of either 5% or 22% that is against annexation by Issaquah. And don't interpret that as a negative for Issaquah. I love Issaquah. I've been here in that same house for 25 years. I love our neighborhood, and I love the area. But I feel that the Plateau is more of a residential environment, and I understand all the economics and all that of going to Issaquah. And like I said, in my first perspectives, I was for it. But after a number of times of understanding all the issues, I'm leaning towards Sammamish. But like the one gentleman said, I'd rather be someplace than no place. So if it's Issaquah, so be it. But like I said, I'm maybe one of the 22%, but there's some of us in Brookshire Estates that prefer to go to Sammamish, and that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Sir? Can I get a show of others who still want to speak? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'll be very brief.
Yeah.
My name's Torrey Cole. I live in Brookshire Estates, 4635 240th Avenue Southeast. And I do want, affirmatively, not casually, to be in Issaquah. I like the city. I know nothing about Sammamish. I'm not going to do an attack on Sammamish. I want to be in the city of Issaquah. I think this council and its meeting, and I've been to maybe one other, exemplifies forward-thinking, aggressive, linear concepts and getting it done. And that's what I'm concerned about. In the campaign running up to the vote, I read both newspapers, and I came across a statement, I don't have it with me, but it's in the literature, so to speak, that one of the officials of Sammamish had said that if this fails, the upcoming vote then prospectively, then they will an attempt to annex Klahanie down to the main entrance of Klahanie, and then that's where their street improvements would end. And I said, what the heck? And then then my further reading gave me the distinct impression that they didn't care about us in Brookshire Estates, not by title, but by location. And I'll borrow a phrase from Russell Wilson, why not us? Why that line of demarcation? And then that means the roads are not going to be fixed. Speaking of roads, there's an entryway. We have a little bit of a boulevard, a few trees, and you separate going out and coming in. And just as you make the move to come into the undivided, if you would, but wide street, there's a pothole. It's turning into a tank trap. We're not in the Ukraine. I don't know why it happens. It happens regularly. It is consistent. And I just don't know why the King County, but it exemplifies, let's say, too much of a burden for too few people managing the issues. I want to be in Issaquah, and I'm running out of time, and I hope I haven't run out of your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who next would like to speak? I saw 4 hands earlier. Sir?
My name is Mark Seeley, and I live in the Klahanie area up in the Bowwood precinct. And I'm also was an active member of Klahanie Choice. And just wanted to say a couple things tonight. Thank you, first of all, for the time you're giving all of us tonight. Really appreciate that. I think dividing up the PAA would really increase the complexity of the issues, both for the city of Issaquah and for the city of Sammamish. If divided up, the road issue becomes very complex. To have a functional road system on the 2 boundaries in particular, Issaquah Falls City Road, Issaquah Pine Lake Road, would require full cooperation between both cities. Both cities would have to come with funding. Both cities may or may not have funding at the same time. It just increases the complexity, and it makes the issues compounding for the Klahanie PAA. Part of wanting to keep that process, that system together, is so that one jurisdiction has the ability to move forward and make the improvements that we all need and want in the PAA. Another point I'd like to say is that we did vote. The point was made a little earlier. We did vote as one whole PAA. And even those in the districts that voted more than 60% or more than 50%, even those in those districts who voted no, they voted no for another choice, and that was for Sammamish. And part of honoring the whole PAA is looking at the whole vote and giving us that choice. I think the comments here are absolutely correct. Drawing the line would be very difficult. Where would that be? You're going to divide interests within the community. It is a community up there. And you're going to pit neighbor against neighbor, and you're going to have a lot of arguments. And we've had enough in this last campaign, and we'd like to move forward. It's not just one more year, it was stated. It's over a year before your amendment is made in June 2015. Then Sammamish has to act, and the King County has to act. It's far more than a year. Please go for number 5 as quickly as you possibly can and release the whole PAA. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak?
All right. Chris Jensen, also in Boatwood. So last week, those in attendance heard some rather passionate testimonies from both recent Klahanie homeowners as well as those who have been somewhat embedded journalists in this issue for well over the past decade. And the message seemed clear. The vote's been decided, and it's now time to let us in the PAA go and seek our futures elsewhere. I think I can say for myself, my wife, and dozens of others who've been waiting patiently since the 2002 MOU promised to move onward that we were going somewhere, but it hasn't happened. Moreover, we do not want to see any further carving up of our PAA, or more precisely, our homes, neighbors, or friends. This vote had a clear question and a clear scope of boundaries, the entire PAA. It wasn't a precinct-by-precinct vote. This has been clear all along and was endorsed by the Boundary Review Board. When a vote doesn't go the way the minority wants, we don't keep changing the question until it's satisfactory. Why? because you'll never satisfy everybody. The democratic process only works because everybody agrees to live by the outcome of the vote. Every election includes radical notions of secession and breaking up boundaries into individual fiefdoms, but rarely come to pass, and history typically looks back at them as irrational. Plus, what precedent do you want to set for those who are in the minority of a precinct, but the majority with respect to the entirety of the vote? Their vote is somehow less important? I personally know some of the folks in the precincts in question, and met another one tonight, that don't want their neighborhood gerrymandered. Additionally, when it comes time to sign contract renewals for services like water, fire, rescue, garbage pickup, or more critical things like 911 jurisdictions, I'd rather it be clear as day that the boundaries are at major intersections or straight lines on a map. And now what we have right now is the way the PAA is defined. And since it was brought up, the split question vote in 2005, a lot of us thought was a unique opportunity to state that we want out of King County, but we didn't want the growing debt of Issaquah. We appreciated the ability to say more with our vote and didn't think of it as any so-called poison pill or anything like that. So as I learned last week, by law, 2014 updates can be to the comprehensive plan don't have to be implemented until June 2015, but they can be implemented before then if the city decides to do so. And I don't see any reason for further delay after years, well, decades of vacillation. So in closing, I'd like to request that the entirety of the PAA be released and that it be done expeditiously. We're tired, and I'm sure you've grown weary of seeing all of us as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Who would like to speak?
I'm Julie Bai, 23829 Southeast 33rd Street, north side of the PAA. I believe I speak again for the most of my neighbors in that general area. And my points are just a few bullet points, just repeating what I've said before, and also some of our other commentators. First of all, Issaquah failed a number of times to annex. And why? So please let it go. Let the PAA go. We residents in the general area and majority of the PAA want to be a part of the city. We do not want to be part of Issaquah. We do not want to be part of an urban center, unlike what the former mayor said. We are very close to Sammamish, where we live, surrounded in 3 sides by Sammamish. We enjoy the living style there. And geographically, we're surrounded by Sammamish. We enjoy the services there. I want to have a say in running the city. I don't want to be part of Issaquah. Issaquah is a lovely city, but it's too remote from where we are. And we have voted, and we don't want to wait any longer for Issaquah to act. City Council, please do the right thing. Hurry up.
Would anybody else like to speak? Please, ma'am.
Okay, Connie Marsh. I don't live in Klahanie. I'm an Issaquah resident who's been frustrated by Klahanie for 12 years. We don't have the resources to perpetually study Klahanie and to go at it over and over and over. We're a complex city trying to grow quickly, and we are understaffed, and we don't have time to stray from what we need to do to make our city great. And we've been straying with Klahanie for a long time. It's time to stop. You all say it's a year. It's never just a year here. It's never just a year. You say $5,000 to $7,000. Just think what one of our nonprofits could do with $5,000 to $7,000. We have wasted incredible amounts of money and incredible amounts of time and not done the things that we need to do for our general town. And we need to stop because there's so much to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody, ma'am?
My name is Karen Dimtroff. I live in Brookshire Estates. We've lived there for 26 years, same home. Never been to a city council meeting before, but we've enjoyed Issaquah. But I want to say that some of the process that's been going on as with this annexation has not been enjoyable. I would like to reiterate the things about the votes. How many times do we have to vote no to make no understood? There has been a little dirty antics during the campaign. It wasn't one-sided, I can guarantee you that. I do know that there was a lot of misinformation that came to our neighborhood and came to others. People were told Sammamish was not interested in us. Sammamish was interested in us, but with you having us on the PAA, they were helpless to do anything. So that connected with the idea of the services. Police officers can't respond to crime in progress in downtown Issaquah and get there in time. I'm certain they cannot get to the Plateau and respond in time. You folks did not commit to adding more officers up there. You committed to adding officers, but we didn't hear any guarantee about how many were going to come to us. We need legal services up there. The area has grown. It's not, like it was 26 years ago. There is the road issue. Another thing I don't think has been mentioned here tonight, but we have friends in South Cove. And that's been lauded a little bit as a great annexation. Well, I'm here to tell you that some folks in South Cove don't think it was great for them. We hear a lot about their utility taxes and things that were unexpected to them and changes. From what I heard, I don't really have specific numbers, but I understand there were increases that were significant and that they didn't look at it as a plus. The 2002 memorandum, not sure what happened to it, not sure why you haven't felt the need or the obligation to release the annexation area. I would ask you to go for number 5. I'm getting 5. Honestly, we have had so little voice in this. Please just hear. The vote tells a lot of the story. It doesn't tell the whole story. We don't honestly want to be annexed. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Another call, anybody? All right, you've had your, thank you so much to everybody. And then I think we are done with audience comments. So I always like to say this during my presentations. This is my last slide. We're wrapping, this is it. This is just a unique opportunity during a committee meeting where, those present and those watching on TV get to hear our discourse, get to hear our thinking. We have an opportunity for members of the audience to share theirs, and now I wanted to give us an opportunity if there's any last comments, questions, insights. And I'm going to start it off because I think it is really important with one thing, and this is just a bit of information because there's a lot of information about this whole topic, but before last week I had never heard about a memorandum of understanding or agreement, whichever it was, in 2002, and I did dig into this week, and it was an agreement signed between us and Sammamish and we at that time said we would consider moving forward and actually giving up the PAA, and there were numerous both council and other community meetings where Trish helped me, somewhere over in the number of like 300 people came and spoke in favor of no, don't do that, we want to be in Issaquah. And so in direct response to community outreach following that memorandum back in 2002, the city made the decision that they wouldn't proceed with that any further, and then 3 years later there was a vote for annexation. So it was in direct response to the residents of the area that the city, after the 2002 memorandum, took their option to hold on to it and actually put it to a vote. And I think that's important to understand. Did I do it okay? Good. Thanks, Trish. Okay, other comments, questions? Yes, Trish. Or Tola, excuse me.
People used to confuse me with Mark, which I could see, but Trish. First of all, I want to thank everybody who's been here tonight. I especially want to thank the people who this is the first time that they've come to a city council meeting. I want to thank the people who came and said they don't want to be part of Issaquah, because it's hard to go before a group of politicians that you don't know and tell them, that you don't want to be part of their group, and that's really to be commended. I keep coming back to I don't know what the percentage is. I don't want to argue with Rob Young. Maybe it's a very small percentage. There's some percentage that don't want to be part of any city, but I do think the vast majority of folks up in the PAA do want to be part of a city. And for those folks, I come back to, I want to see them be part of a city. So in addition to needing to understand what the implications would be for our city to take on some subset if we think that makes sense or doesn't make sense, I really want to make sure that this end goal of getting folks into a city, and Sammamish is a great city, and if folks want to be part of Sammamish, that's a great outcome, and as good of an outcome for folks up there as being part of Issaquah. But I have a nightmare scenario, and the nightmare scenario is we give the entire PAA up, and then Sammamish gets a 49% vote. And the folks here who want to be part of Sammamish go, oh man, if those 3 precincts had been in Issaquah, maybe we would have gotten 51% instead of 49%, and I can't predict what's going to happen. But that's genuinely my concern about option 4 versus option 5. It's getting the folks up there into a city. So as much as I need to understand the financial implications of taking on a subset, I also want over the next weeks to try to, and I don't know how, to get my arms around this issue of what is the best. And I've heard many of you are here saying, we're telling you, release the whole thing, that's what we want. But I really want to make sure it's that PAA has been part of Issaquah's PAA, and I consider it our responsibility to hand that off fairly and with the best chance of a positive outcome as possible. So I need to understand for option 4 versus option 5 what the best likely outcomes are of each of those 2 options. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. I want to continue to talk with folks up there about it. The last thing I want to say is this thing about we shouldn't carve it up because carving things up is a bad idea. I just want to point out that if they had not carved up the Plateau, 12, however many years ago it was, you'd all still be in either Redmond's PAA or Issaquah's PAA because the incorporation would have failed. So Sammamish was created by cherry picking which parts of the Plateau were ready to incorporate into a city, and it's become a great city. And this process will move forward. Nobody's arguing options 1, 2, or 3. We're talking about options 4 or options 5. So this process will continue, and if it involves subdividing further the Plateau, which has already been subdivided many times, if the outcome is the best outcome for the residents up there, then it will have been the best thing that we could do as a council. Thanks.
And
Paul, do you want everybody's comments around the table?
I would welcome that. And remember, our objective was for the council, the members of the Land and Shore Committee, to know the sentiments of the entire council. Because the real action, the next action step is in your hands relative to the work you're starting tomorrow. So, yes.
I'm echoing a lot of what Tola said, but I think the turnout tonight, the public hearing portion, was great. And it was good to hear all the different sides of the story and all the different interpretations of the data. And it didn't help all that much. It actually was kind of crazy. But I still found at the end of it, I was still pretty much on the same page, that I believe that the majority up there wants to be part of a city. I believe option 4 and 5 are the ones we should look at, and I don't think I can really support 4 unless a little more data would show that it makes sense to cut this piece out, and we are able to efficiently provide services, and it makes sense for it to be with Issaquah. So I need to see the data in order to do that. If the data doesn't make sense, and if the financial part doesn't make sense, then I don't see that carving out is an option at all. But I need data to make that decision.
Thank you. That's very clear. Thank you. Anybody else offer any final comments? Nina?
Thank you. Yes, my favorite part of the meeting really is to hear from the community. So thank you, everybody who came. And I haven't had my mind changed. I would still need to be convinced that this was not a detriment to the people of Issaquah. I don't mean to say that I'm looking for a financial benefit when I'm looking at managing the numbers. I just want to make sure that it does no harm financially to us. But one thing that Paul said a few minutes ago, or actually about 45 minutes ago, I think was a challenge, and that was, we want all this data, but really, if we had this data, could we still do it? Maybe it's the boundaries. And if we're looking at a sequence of things, and trying to create a decision tree, maybe the first one, just taking on that challenge a little bit, is to decide, could there be reasonable boundaries? Is that even possible to take part of the PAA? Now, if that is a no-go, then there's no reason to get other data, because the other data, what if it said it was okay financially? And then you go back and say, well, yeah, but we don't have boundaries. So if you're looking at a sequence so that we can limit the process and find a point to which a decision could be made without having to go all the way down the path, maybe that's the first one. Then decide whether it's financially feasible, and then et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's the big challenge. Data won't tell us. Maybe being there will tell us. I tend to feel that PAA is a community. It feels like one, but I know I'm not living there. I think that's the biggest challenge, though, is to decide whether we could choose boundaries and if they were a viable way of making a decision, or at least a first decision.
So if I may, and I don't want to put you on the spot, I want to make sure I understand that. Do you think that choosing boundaries is a non-starter? I just want to try to get clarity.
I mean that choosing boundaries would be the first thing. In order to get a reasonable report, if you wanted a new report from Nesbitt, and also to decide whether the Nesbitt report was worth investing in.
Okay. So you believe that it's the first thing, and getting a viable line is possible.
If there is a viable line, we could go forward. I'm sorry that I'm not saying there's not a line. There could be.
Right. I
There
understand.
could still be a line that allows part of it to come to us. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Josh?
So the die was cast with this vote for the entire PAA or not. And I fully understand the comments that were made this evening saying, hey, look, this is the route you chose to go, Issaquah. You have to live with the results of the democratic process. The vote was no. It was by 30-something votes, but the vote was no. We've had elections in this city that were as close as this vote was. And we have the results, and that's what we have, and we live with the results, and we move forward from there. But there is a learning process as well through this. And, we have seen and we have heard tonight some pretty significant support from some neighborhoods. I think we talked about boundaries. Get out a map, look at where the natural lines are, look at the school district lines, look at the HOA lines, look at the things that matter based on the comments we've heard tonight, and make it as limited as possible if we're going to pursue any annexation effort of the southern tip of the PAA. The more territory you start to involve, not only do you have the cost revenue starting to shift, but the lines become much, much harder to deal with. If you go all the way up to Klahanie Boulevard, boy, then it starts becoming confusing because you've got a lot of streets and a lot of turnoffs and a lot of cul-de-sacs. If you keep it as limited and as narrow as possible, you take out a piece of paper, you draw the lines. I don't see why we have to go do a new Nesbitt study or an enhanced Nesbitt study or get all this additional data if we're looking at a very limited portion and we adhere to the vote on the rest of the PAA. The voters have spoken. We look at an area that makes geographical sense, school district sense, HOA sense, and we narrowly tailor that. And, you can sit down with a small committee, an ad hoc committee perhaps of this council, who can investigate and look into these issues. And we have precedent for ad hoc committees before. And we don't have to start spending $5,000 to $7,000 more to do that. 3 council members can sit down and do that and receive citizen input on these topics. And we can get that done, I think, in a few months' time. And we can get the issue to this limited, narrowly tailored area by the November ballot. And we don't have to keep holding folks in limbo. Because I didn't really hear anyone tonight who said, you know, I want to be in limbo. I just really don't want this issue resolved. What I heard is figure it out. Whether you release us, take us, whatever it is you're going to do it. Because we've gone through this again and again and again. And I have a very unique perspective coming into the city through an annexation and having gone through that process. And, you know, I heard comments about whether everyone in South Cove liked it or not, and it's true. Not everybody liked the results of the annexation or what it meant. But you know, that's democracy, and you live with the results. So I think this is something we can do actually very quickly. This is something we can move on without spending a lot of money, without spending a significant amount of time. And I guess just in closing, I also want to thank everyone who gave comments tonight. It was very informative. It was very helpful. I know myself and others took notes of what everyone said. We didn't have music playing you off, but everybody did a really good job of sticking to the limits, so we can hopefully get you home a reasonable hour tonight. So thanks.
Thank you, Josh. Eileen.
Just a repeat of probably what I said earlier in the evening, but I believe it's a responsibility almost to make sure that the people that did vote 60 plus to 74 and the higher numbers, that we at least take the time to take a look at this and make sure that we're doing the appropriate thing. And I don't believe the $5,000 to $7,000 to making sure that we're getting the proper information from the Nesbitt study is unnecessarily burdensome to making that. I think it's an important piece that we have that information to make this decision. Everybody's put in a fair amount of time and energy and heart and soul into this, and I think just a little bit more time to make sure that we're doing the appropriate right thing for everybody in this particular area and for the city of Issaquah. It's worth a few dollars and a little bit more time.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you. Stacy?
Thanks. I too want to thank everybody for coming. We have a lot of committee meetings all of the time, and we're very lonely. And so it's always exciting to have a lot of people show up, and so I thank everybody for coming and staying so late. But we've heard a lot about the numbers tonight. We've heard that we should abide by the numbers, that the numbers were clear. We've also heard that we shouldn't put too much stock in the numbers. But to me, if we weren't going to pay attention to the numbers, then I guess we shouldn't have put this up for a vote. And since this was only one in a series of similar votes over many, many years, I have to assume that the voters were informed and knew when they voted what they were doing. But I'm also for self-determination. And there are precincts to the south in which 60% plus voted to annex to Issaquah. That was pretty clear. I'm not convinced that dividing the PAA makes sense, but I'm willing to consider additional information. I also wholeheartedly agree with Nina and others that this should continue to be a very thoughtful and well-reasoned process. Given the history, I'm not sure that it also makes sense to rush this. I don't mean that we need to sit around and do nothing, but I'm not feeling like this needs to be a very rushed process. We also heard from Tom Vance tonight, the mayor of Sammamish, that he's interested in our cities working together on items of mutual interest. And maybe the PAA is one of those items. Of course, I cannot know that, but I'm interested in a conversation with Sammamish to see if there are opportunities to work together on the PAA.
Thank you, Stacy. So I had no idea what direction this might go, and of course we're not voting on anything. But I would anybody disagree with me that the general sense is that taking an earnest look at the viability of adjusting the line to consider changing the PAA boundary to possibly include the southern triangle, well, that might be the wrong name, but the southern area, and for that, and to get that data and to do it in a timely manner. And I would hope we'll iron this out. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. But I think that's the sense of the council this evening, and I know that the The committee has its work, cut out, and we and our leadership have our work cut out as well. But I think it's pretty clear to me that a majority, or there's a general sense in the council that we should pursue the option to at least study adjusting the line for possible annexation of the southern portion of the Klahanie PAA.
When you say study, what form would that take? Like study, or study amongst us, staff study?
I think you've given us a good alternative to consider, and so I'll commit to you that we can do that. I think I said it earlier, and Nina found another way to say the same thing. My big concern is there a logical line? There may not be, and that maybe is something that we can we can take a run at. But I don't think I need to decide that right now, or we need to decide that. Let's let our heads spend at least one night on a pillow before we decide exactly how we do that. It's the better decision will be made, guaranteed. We good? All right, so I'm going to close the meeting. Thank everybody for your attendance. Over 200 years ago, the greatest experiment in the history of the world started, where people came together and said, we can self-govern ourselves. And then, maybe some 80 years later, it almost crashed down. It didn't work, and we had a civil war. But boy, today, right now, we demonstrated that this is a country where everybody is part of the government. We are self-governing. Thank you for your participation. You can stop the recording now.
As we say, let's go off the record. Paul, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.